Everyone thinks because you're a zombie, you don't know good coffee. Well, they're wrong. There's only one brew that gets my seal of approval. Deadly Grounds coffee is my guilty pleasure. The aroma is so intoxicating. It brings all of my neighbors out of the woodwork. Deadly Grounds coffee. Coffee to die for and zombie approved. It's good to get a little deadly. Use the front door! Oh, they're so disgusting.
The Dorkening and all affiliated shows are not intended for anyone under the age of 18. The following may contain discussions or scenes that have adult situations, graphic violence, nudity, strong sexual content, and graphic language. This show is intended for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised.
Ladies and gentlemen, the motion picture you're about to see contains scenes so terrifying, the public must be given grave warning.
Hello and good evening. Welcome to the Bloody Binge movie podcast. I'm your host, Sewer Dweller. This week we're going to do things a little different. Most of the time, what we do here on the Bloody Binge movie podcast is discuss movies, whether it be horror movies, grindhouse, exploitation, cult, comedies, everything in between. We really don't have too much we don't cover. But mostly we are a horror movie podcast. But this week, and I've done this a couple of times in the past before I joined the Owl Light Network, um, I've done something called Shivers. Shivers is what I basically call my paranormal, supernatural style show where we explore different types of haunting, the supernatural hauntings, cryptids, alien encounters, true crime, cults, all that kind of stuff. Um, I was doing it before. I was doing it once a month. I might go back to once a month at least until we do something a little. We might do something a little. We'll see how it goes. But I do want to thank everybody last week. The episode of Sharkula ended up being the most watched video or most watched and listened to episode of the Bloody Binge movie podcast of all time in our very short history. So thank you for that. I hope everybody enjoyed the episode of Sharkula. I sure enjoyed putting it on for you. Um, but this week we are actually going to start. It is going to be almost like a 50 episode, if you like, technically, a 50 episode series where we will go through each state and discuss the cryptids of each state. Um, Sometimes I'll have guests on. Some, unfortunately, this week I do not. But my plan is to go through each state. I have a wheel designed. Actually, it is a program off of the internet that I can hit, and we will decide the state via that for every episode we do of this series. We are going to start in the state that I live in this week, Ohio. It's technically, I guess, my home state now. I've lived here for 11 years now. My original home state, of course, is Virginia. But we're going to start with Ohio just because it's local and it was a little easier for me to um, look up some stuff. And if I felt, if I had the urge basically or had the ability to go to some of these places, because there's a lot local as well. So I hope everybody enjoys this episode of Shivers. Next week we will return to our original format of movies. So keep a lookout on the Twitter page to um, on the Bloody Binge Movie Podcast Twitter page to see what movie we're going to do next. Also, if you have any suggestions for movies you want to see or hear be covered on the Bloody Binge Movie Podcast, feel free to email me at bloodybinge@gmail.com. Suggestions, I will always take suggestions. And of course, long as they're available for me to purchase or stream, I will definitely take all suggestions into mind. But for basically, let's go ahead and get started with this week's episode of Shivers. Normally, again, we're going to change it up a little bit again because normally we do movie and haunted house industry news when we do the Bloody Binge Movie Podcast. But this week, we're going to do something a little more lighthearted. We're going to do kind of some stupid news. Some stupid news stories from around the world, around the country, around the world, and maybe have a few laughs, a few concerns, maybe from just how dumb the world is right now. But we're gonna do that. There's really not much haunted house news that's coming out anymore right now, because, like I said, we're getting closer to the season. So next month we'll probably have a lot more news. A lot of the the big theme parks and the big haunts have already, announced their themes and stuff like that. So the more news comes out, though, I will gladly discuss there. And of course, movie news we'll return next week. So let's go ahead and get started on some stupid news. By the way, happy World UFO Day. Apparently today is the World UFO Day because today is the anniversary of Roswell. I say this because our first story comes out of Norfolk, Virginia, my old hometown. I was born in Norfolk, raised in Virginia Beach, but from Norfolk, Virginia, out of the Associated Press. For those who don't know, who don't celebrate World UFO, they consider this. A former U.S. Air Force intelligence officer told Congress last summer about a government program that retrieves and reverse engineers unidentified flying objects. The Mexican Congress held an unprecedented session in September, during which supposed mummies were presented as non-human beings that are not part of our terrestrial evolution. And NASA now has a director of research for unidentified flying objects, or what it calls unidentified anomalous phenomena. This is just, I don't know, this story just going on and on. Never mind that the Pentagon denied the former intelligence officer's claims that Mexican researchers said the mummies made no sense and that a NASA study found no evidence of extraterrestrials. I literally copied this story word for word. I read it and I could have sworn it had something. So look at the history of, let's do this instead. And look at the history of World UFO Day. World UFO Day has its roots in the so-called Roswell incident on July 2nd of 1947. And on that date, something crashed at what was then the J.B. Foster Ranch in New Mexico. There were reports that the U.S. military had recovered a flying disc, quote-unquote flying disc, but officials later said the debris was merely the remnants of a high-altitude weather balloon. The Air Force investigated the incident in 1994 and charges that it was covering up the truth. Amid charges that it was covering up the truth. Yeah, because people are gonna believe you that you went ahead and investigated it 50 years later. At 50 years after the whatever it was crashed. Yeah, that you want people to believe you. That'll work. It concluded that the supposed alien spacecraft was likely a secret Army Air Force balloon designed to monitor Soviet nuclear testing. The material found near Roswell consisted of foil-wrapped fabric, wooden sticks, rubber pieces, and small I-beams with strange markings on them. A local newspaper headline described the find dramatically and unequivocally: Air Force captures flying saucer on ranch. The Air Force research did not locate or develop any information that the Roswell incident was a UFO event, wrote Colonel Richard Weaver, author of the report. In 2022, Congress held its first hearing on UFOs in half a century, as the Pentagon investigated hundreds of unexplained sightings in the sky. The spotted objects appeared to be an aircraft flying without any discernible means of propulsion. They have been reported near military bases and coastlines, raising the prospect that what witnesses actually spotted was secret Chinese or Russian technology. A 2021 government report reviewed 144 sightings of aircraft and other devices that were apparently flying at mysterious speeds or trajectories. It found no extraterrestrial links, but drew few other conclusions and called for better data collection. Lawmakers from both parties have said the UFOs are a national security concern, but the sightings are usually fleeting. Some appear for no more than an instant on camera and then sometimes end up distorted by the camera lens. Ronald, and I'm going to butcher this name, Moultrie, the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence, said during a 2022 hearing that the Pentagon was trying to destigmatize the issue and encourage pilots and other military personnel to report anything unusual they see. Then things got a little strange last year. During a congressional hearing in late July, retired Air Force Major David Grush testified that the U.S. is concealing a long-standing program that retrieves and reverse engineers unidentified flying objects. Asked whether the U.S. government had information about extraterrestrial life, Grush said that the U.S. likely has been aware of non-human activity since the 1930s. The Pentagon denied Grush's claims of a cover-up and denied the existence of any such program. Of any such program. The shriveled bodies with shrunken heads. And unlike the hearings in the U.S., the testimony before lawmakers in the Mexican Congress includes alleged evidence of aliens. During an unprecedented session in September, Mexican journalist Jose Jaime Maussan, again, I'm probably butchering that name. I'm not good with names. Presented 2 boxes containing shriveled bodies with shrunken, warped heads, supposed mummies found in Peru. It's the queen of all evidence, Maussan claimed. That is, if the DNA is showing us that they are non-human beings and that there is nothing that looks like this in the world, we should take it as such. The apparently desiccated bodies date back to 2017 and were found deep underground in the sandy Peruvian coastal desert of Nazca. Most attribute the famous Nazca lines to ancient indigenous communities. Julieta Fierro, researcher at the Institute of Astronomy at the National Autonomous University of Mexico, that's a lot of words, was among those to express skepticism, saying that many details about the figures made no sense. She noted that the scientists would need more advanced technology than the X-rays they claimed to use to determine if the allegedly calcified bodies were non-human. At another hearing in November, Maussan made the case again, citing a non-human that did not have lungs or ribs. The Pentagon released a study in March that had examined the many UFO sightings over nearly the past century and found no evidence of aliens or extraterrestrial intelligence. The report analyzed U.S. government investigations since 1945. It also found no evidence that the United States or private companies had reverse engineered extraterrestrial technology. The Pentagon's report arrived about 6 months after NASA released a report on UFOs, which also found no evidence of extraterrestrials. But NASA Administrator Bill Nelson did acknowledge that another Earth-like planet could exist within the billions of galaxies in the universe. If you ask me, do I believe there's life in a universe that is so vast that it's hard for me to comprehend how big it is? My personal answer is yes, Nelson said on a news conference. When pressed by reporters on whether the U.S. or other governments are hiding aliens or otherworldly ships, Nelson said, "Show me the evidence." Well, I kind of agree with him. I'm not one to. Here's the best way to describe me when it comes to the paranormal and supernatural stuff like that. I've been ghost hunting numerous times. Back home, I used to go all the time, locally and that. And when I go with a team or when I go by myself, I am always what people would call a skeptic. Not because I don't believe, but because I don't believe everything is supernatural or paranormal or anything like that. Like when it comes to aliens, I believe it's very selfish for anyone to say there's no other life out there. It is very selfish for people to say that as Earthlings, as Americans, Russians, it doesn't matter what country you're from, as Earthlings, for us to stand and say, "Hey, there is no possibility of other life to be in this big, unending, vast universe that is out there," is just ridiculous. It's not possible for there not to be another planet out there that's habitable. Whether it be for us or for another species or anything like that. It's just not possible. Now, do I believe they're coming here, snatching people up and everything like that? I don't know. I can't tell you yes, I can't tell you no. But you can't. I will argue with anyone who tells me that there's no possibility of life on another planet. But so that story was. I mean, I read the story and I thought it would be interesting to share. But now that I'm reading it again, it's like that was a nothing story. I apologize for that one. But moving on, this one you'll maybe hopefully get a laugh out of this one. Also, out of the Associated Press from Lincoln, Nebraska, a University of Nebraska regent has proposed a way for lifelong Cornhusker fans to carry their support into the afterlife. When Memorial Stadium undergoes its next renovation, Regent Barbara Whites of Omaha suggested building a columbarium under the football field where departed fans can have their ashes inurned. The idea might be dead on arrival, though, because her fellow regents laughed at the proposal at a recent meeting. Whites acknowledged she made her pitch lightheartedly, but didn't think any proposal should be dismissed out of hand with the university facing a $58 million budget shortfall. The price for niches, where cremation urns are stored, could vary depending on location, with a spot under the 50-yard line or end zone sold at a premium. Revenue, she said, would go to academics. One thing I know best about Nebraska is how much the football team and the volleyball team mean, White said. We really do love our sports teams and follow them everywhere. It's part of being a Nebraskan. So why wouldn't being buried under the field be a great way to be close to your team forever? So it was kind of a combination of needing money, talking about ways to get it, and then kind of trying to say, let's use our imaginations. Fans wishing to scatter a loved one's ashes at their favorite team stadium is not unheard of, and there are columbariums and other fan memorials at soccer, rugby, and horse racing venues in Europe. There are cemeteries and columbariums at Notre Dame, Texas A&M, and military academies that are unaffiliated with sports. But the passion of fans makes sports-themed columbariums a natural, said Colm Hannon, founder of an Ireland-based business that creates sports-themed fan memorials in Europe. I think many families realized the fans' spiritual home was the stadium, Hannon said in an email. It was the place they had the best memories. It's somewhere they would much rather go to remember their loved ones than a graveyard that they spent little or no happy times in. I'm sorry, I don't know anybody that just hangs out in a graveyard and goes, "Man, I can't wait to get here." If you want to be mourned, choose a graveyard. If you want to be celebrated, choose a sports real estate developer with Suber. has been trying to get approval. Okay. Something happened with that. I don't know what the hell they did to that story. I'm assuming to choose the columbarium. Sports real estate developer Whit Suber has been trying to get an approval from the University of South Carolina leaders to build an above-ground columbarium across the street from the Williams-Brice Stadium, home of the football team. He came up with the idea in 2016, shortly after he bought land adjacent to a popular tailgating area. He called White's idea brilliant. Suber, a 1992 South Carolina graduate, said if he builds his columbarium, a portion of the proceeds would go to the athletic department or a collective that pays Gamecocks athletes for endorsement work. He said he already has a permit. I'm not trying to build it in opposition of the university, and we're slowly breaking down that opposition. Suber said. Suber said some opponents have told him it would be inappropriate for people of different religions to have their ashes inured in the same place. So don't. Just don't. If you don't. Others have told him it would hurt recruiting as ground. At Nebraska, White's proposal calls for a construction of a columbarium to coincide with the replacement of the stadium playing surface whenever that happens. A special entrance would allow fans to visit the niches of loved ones on game days. Regent Paul Kenny of Kearney said he found White's proposal somewhat entertaining but impractical. He said her idea is not in my top 1,000 for possible budget solutions. Regent Jack Stark of Omaha, the Huskers team psychologist from 1989 through 2004, said over the years he had people tell him a loved one had died and their dying wish was to have their ashes sprinkled on the field. I do think there would be a market for it, Stark said, because a lot of people follow the Huskers and love them. So basically, if you love your football team, and let's not pretend that in America we love our football, whether it be college, whether it be the NFL, which I live in Ohio, and college is way bigger than the NFL here in Ohio. I don't know if it's because we have two terrible teams, or because of Ohio State, because I used to work for a chip vendor, and I sold a hell of a lot more chips on Saturday than I ever did on Sunday. Especially when Ohio State's playing, that is. And not only that, you have a mixture of Ohio State and some Michigan fans here. It is a huge rivalry. There is, people do give each other shit when they are Ohio State and Michigan fans, and I 100% believe that it would be a very beneficial, financially beneficial idea or policy to, put something like that underneath the field. Grandpa dies. He's a huge Nebraska Cornhuskers fan. Let's bury him on the 50-yard line. Let's bury him in the end zone. Let's bury him on the 20-yard line. And I think people would pay it. I really do. But if you believe in the paranormal and supernatural, that fucking field's gonna be haunted. It's it's a good idea though. It's a great idea. I think it would 100% be positive. I think it would be a great. But moving on to our next story, we are still in the Associated Press, and we're going to Fernandina Beach, Florida, which this is something I am surprised does not happen more often. An online gaming dispute made its way to the real world when a New Jersey man flew to Florida to attack another player with a hammer, authorities said. Edward Kang, 20, is charged with attempted second-degree murder and armed burglary with a mask, according to Nassau County court records. He was arrested early Sunday morning. I just want to let you know this is a weird one, Nassau County Sheriff Bill Leeper said during a news conference on Monday. Some things you just can't make up. Apparently, this guy's never been in a Call of Duty lobby. Kang and the victim, another young man around the same age as Kang, had never met in real life. but they both played Arcade, a medieval fantasy, massively multiplayer online role playing game. What people call an MMORPG. It's kind of like your war zones and stuff like that. Warhammer, your World of Warcraft and things like that. I don't know why I said Warzone. But the game's publisher announced in April that it would be shutting down servers in Europe and North America on June 27th, citing a declining number of active players. Kang flew from Newark, New Jersey to Jacksonville, Florida last Thursday after telling his mother that he was going to visit a friend that he had met while playing a video game, officials said. Officials didn't say how Kang learned where the victim lives. Upon arrival, Kang took an Uber to a hotel in Fernandina Beach, about 35 miles north of Jacksonville, and then bought a hammer at a local hardware store, deputies said. Um, Honestly, it's really not hard. I promise you, the other person was talking so much shit to Kang that if he was talking enough shit that this dude got on a plane, booked a hotel, bought a hammer, and went to this dude's house. I promise he probably talking shit. Then people behind a screen have a very large sense of security when they think people don't or can't or won't get to them. I have no doubt this person probably told him where he lived, not thinking this dude would get on a plane in Newark, New Jersey, and fly to Florida. Kang went to the victim's Fernandina beach home, which was unlocked around 2 a.m. Who doesn't lock? Yeah. 2 a.m. Sunday, authorities said. The victim was walking out of his bedroom when he was confronted by Kang, who hit him on the head with the hammer. Officials said the two struggled as the victim called for help. His stepfather responded and helped restrain Kang until the police arrived. The victim suffered several head wounds that were not considered life-threatening, officials said. He received staples at the hospital. Once in custody, Kang told investigators that the victim is a bad person online, officials said. He also asked deputies how much jail time people got for breaking and entering and assault. I would say, Mr. Kang, it's going to be a long time before you play video games again, Leaper said. Online court records didn't list an attorney for Kang, but he was being held without bond. Guys, feel free to give me your feelings and let me know what you think of some of these stories. That one, I've said it before. I'm surprised that shit doesn't happen more often. Especially with how toxic some of these video game lobbies can be. I mean, if anybody who's ever played Grand Theft Auto Online will tell you, you could be doing your thing, doing a mission, doing something, and somebody will literally randomly just blow you the fuck up just because. They won't be sorry, they won't think twice about it. They will just blow you the hell up. Same in Call of Duty, you got all these kids on there that talk crap and that. I still remember, I think about 10 years ago almost now, a story coming out of England or Britain or UK, that this guy, this kid was online, and I guess he had been playing with this guy all day. The kid kept talking shit over and over and over again, the guy finally got sick of it, found out where the kid lives, went to his house, and beat the shit out of the kid. Now, I don't say that's a good thing. I don't suggest it, but video games get people angry. Call of Duty is one of them ones that will definitely get you mad. And I get mad at games and stuff like that, but I've never been mad enough to go to someone's house and physically attack them. But I'm surprised that doesn't happen more often, in all honesty. So yeah, this guy's probably not going to be playing video games for a while. Breaking and entering. I think it said what attempted murder. Yeah, he's not going to be playing games for a while. Give me 1 second, guys. Sorry for that. I needed to take a sip of drink. So moving on from the Huffington Post. This is actually a really cool story. The silver pocket watch was a prized possession of Theodore Roosevelt, a keepsake given to him by his sister and her husband in 1898 before he became president. That would travel with him around the world and end up at Sagamore Hill, his home on Long Island, New York, and now a National Historic Site. But in 1987, it went from museum piece to pilfered prize when someone stole it from an unlocked case at the Theodore Roosevelt inaugural National Historic Site in Buffalo, New York, where it was on loan. It was a mystery that endured 36 years until it turned up at a Florida auction house last year and was seized by federal agents. On Thursday, it was returned to public display at Sagamore Hill as the National Park Service and the FBI triumphantly announced it was back home during a ceremony featuring Roosevelt's great-grandson, Tweed Roosevelt. It took you 40 years to find it. Why are we celebrating that it's back home? You did a shit job. It took you 40 years. This was real good news, Tweed Roosevelt, 82, said Friday in a phone interview. For me, it kind of felt like almost as if a piece of TR's, I'm assuming TR's, Teddy Roosevelt's spirit being returned to Sagamore Hill, like a little bit of him was coming back. And so I felt that was really cool. Growing up, he said he didn't know about the watch and only learned about it vaguely after it was stolen. He called it unremarkable in appearance but priceless to his great-grandfather. As it turns out this isn't just any old pocket watch, he said. It was a watch that Teddy Roosevelt placed great sentimental value on. The mystery of the watch's disappearance, however, is not fully solved. It is still not clear who stole it and how. The Park Service and the FBI only released details of its reappearance this week after an investigation. The agencies did not return messages seeking comment on Friday. Roosevelt, who was president from 1901 till 1909, apparently had the watch with him at the Battle of San Juan Hill in Cuba during the Spanish-American War and during future exploits, including wild game hunting in Africa and exploring the Amazon in South America, according to the Park Service. The watch, made by now defunct Waltham Watch Company in Massachusetts, appears like many pocket watches of its day with a plain silver exterior and no etchings. But the inside reveals its significance with engraving that says Theodore Roosevelt and from DR and CRR, referring to Roosevelt's brother-in-law and sister, Douglas Robinson Jr. and Corinne Roosevelt Robinson. When it showed up last year at Blackwell Auctions in Clearwater, Florida, owner Edwin Bailey said was excited by the engraving, but skeptical that it was real. It has no supporting documents with it, and the general mindset among art dealers and collectors is to verify before getting your hopes up, he said. I've said that 1,000 times with autographs. If you're looking at autographs on eBay or Facebook Marketplace or something like that, and they do not have a certificate of authentication or I guess a picture of the person signing that exact item, don't buy it because it's more than likely a fake. Bailey said he did not know the watch was stolen, and the person who brought it to him didn't know where it came from. He declined to identify the person, saying he never divulges the identities of his consigners. He only would say the person was an art dealer and collector in Buffalo in the 1970s and the 1980s. The collector told Bailey that he received the watch from another man who used to borrow money from him to go picking, quote unquote, picking for antiques and other collectibles in the late 1980s. The picker would leave the watch with the collector as collateral, Bailey said. One day, the picker just never showed up to retrieve the watch, and the collector found out that he had died, Bailey said. This dealer probably had that thing just squirreled away for 30 years thinking it was just another pocket watch, Bailey said Friday. I don't think that my consignor had a clue about not only where it came from, but he probably didn't even suspect it was real. Bailey said he researched the watch for weeks, poring through Roosevelt's writings in online archives, trying to come up with the definitive proof that it was authentic. He said he found several bits of evidence that made him believe it was, and the FBI, Park Service, and Sagamore Hill officials would later confirm it was the real deal. In a note to his sister in May of 1898, Roosevelt wrote, "Darling Corinne, you could not have given me a more useful present than the watch. It was exactly what I wished. Thank old Douglas for the watch and for his many, many kindnesses." He also mentioned a watch in his 1914 book, Through the Brazilian Wilderness, writing about a bayou crossing. He said, one result of the swim, by the way, was that my watch, a veteran of Cuba and Africa, came to an indignant halt. Bailey believes that was the same watch Roosevelt's sister and brother-in-law gave him. Bailey also wrote letters and sent pictures of the watch to various museums, the Sagamore Hill Historic Site, and others, asking if they had any information about it. Last year, shortly before he was set to put the watch up for auction, Bailey got a visit from several people he thought were interested buyers. Then they pulled out their badges and a warrant. It was the FBI coming to investigate the watch and take possession of it, he said. The federal agents were courteous in asking questions, and he told them the story. He said he was glad that the watch is now where it belongs. It was exciting, Bailey said. I've had a small handful of items that I say, these are the best things I've ever handled. I got to hold something that was personally treasured by a prominent American president. This was Teddy Roosevelt's watch. This was a Mount Rushmore guy's personal pocket watch. So I mean, that's a good story with a good ending. Likelihood is the picker that the guy paid probably stole the watch. He'll never be brought to justice because he's dead, but we'll never know who stole it. But it's back where it belongs. It's back in the custody of the Roosevelt family at the Teddy Roosevelt Historic Site. So if you live anywhere near New York, go take a look at it. But that's a good story. This next one, we'll see. This is going to cause, I think, a little bit of an argument. Not really an argument, but a debate about who you think's right or wrong. But man at nudist site left fuming as entitled mom asks him to put on clothes. This is from the Mirror, which I believe is a United Kingdom paper or website. But a man has sparked a heated debate after he opened up about an incident involving a mom and her children. Recalling the situation on social media, he explained that he lives near a hot springs that officially allows nudity. So basically, at this hot spring, they allow you to take your clothes off to bathe in a hot spring. If you've never been to a hot spring, it's amazing. You feel really good when you get out of the hot spring. But most of the ones in America, needless to say, they're not. You can't get nude at them. But he wrote, "It's an hour drive away from my home, I guess. It's on public land and a relatively well-known hotspot. There are signs up warning prudes who have complained for years that yes, people are allowed to be nude there. I've been going there about once a week recently, and every time I get nude. I like to go Sunday mornings because it's mostly empty. Last Sunday I arrived and stripped down as normal. There was a woman there who was using the springs as well, and I chatted with her a bit. And after about 20 minutes, another woman arrived and came over to, quote, talk to me. He explained that she told him her 3 children were around the corner and would be coming by to use the hot springs. He remarked that he could see them down the trail walking to the site, and they looked to be between the ages of 12 and 6. The nude man continued, I was really confused because there was plenty of room still, so I told her very confused, okay. She was trying to subtly tell me what she really wanted, but had to spell it out for me. She then asked me to get decent. I was just taken aback at first and told her, no. I wasn't done using the spring yet, and I only had the clothes I was going to wear back home. She then told, not asked, me to leave her so her kids could use the spring. The man confessed that her attitude really annoyed him, and he ended up arguing with her and telling her to fuck off. He added, she ended up storming off. The lady who was in the spring when I arrived got out and told me I'm an asshole, so I called her a bitch. I left about 20 minutes later and saw the woman and her kids walked back to their car. I waved at her and said to enjoy the hot springs, and she flipped me off. While I was really angry in the moment, I'm starting to feel like I got dragged down to her level and made an ass out of myself. People reading the Reddit post were torn with many feeling anger on behalf of the man for being asked to change his life to suit someone else's children. One person firmly on his side wrote, if you don't want your kids to see a flaccid penis at a nude hot springs, there's a simple fix. Don't go to a nude hot spring. A man has sparked a heated... Okay, that's... I knew this was going to do that. Hold on, guys. I thought I deleted most of it. What happened was when I copy and pasted this into my notes for the day, it kind of double did it. Here we go. Another user added, she knowingly brought her kids into an environment where they could have been exposed to nudity. What would she have done if there were 20 folks in there in the buff? Fought them all? It's her own negligent, poor parenting that put her children in that situation. She clearly expects the world to revolve around them, and that's entitled as fuck. I bet they all get participation trophies too. However, despite being on his side in terms of principles, many felt he could have handled the situation better, which I think that's the side that I'm on. One user replied, well, your initial frustration was understandable. Responding with anger and hostility likely exacerbated the conflict. Reflecting on the situation and considering alternative ways to handle similar incidents in the future can help maintain a positive experience for all visitors to the hot spring. So, excuse me. What do you guys think? I mean, do you think he's in the wrong, or do you think she's in the wrong? Because I if there's plenty of signs warning, hey, there's gonna be nudity here, be prepared. There might be a naked person in this pool. Might not be a good idea. I wouldn't bring my. And if I saw those signs, basically, I wouldn't bring my kid there. That's simple. That's what I would do. Me personally, that doesn't mean I agree with him or her or anything like that, but I don't think I would bring my kid to a pool that had a bunch of signs, or a hot spring that had a bunch of signs up that says, "Hey, there's going to be nude people here. They're allowed to be here." So yeah, what do you got? What do you guys think? You can leave comments here, comments on the on any of the videos. Just let me know what you think. If you think he's in the wrong or she's in the wrong. I'll be going 43 minutes. That's gonna do it for all of our stupid news this week. I hope everybody enjoyed that segment. We're gonna go ahead and take a very quick break. And then we're going to come back with the Cryptids of Ohio. See you guys in a couple of minutes.
Greetings and shabebans. We are the Retro Reductopus Cephala Podcast, a long-form bi-weekly show that celebrates all the things that made growing up awesome.
Well, that sounds good, but I don't know what all those words mean.
I think what Parasite Steve's trying to say is that on Retro Reductopus, we explore a range of retro goodness, from toys, video games, and movies, to cartoons, and even snacks and school lunches.
Oh.
And we do it all with a positive spin, a slew of killer guests, and some very adult language.
And you know what else is cool?
No.
This crazy show is part of the Door King Podcast Network with new episodes every Tentacle Tuesday.
What's that?
And if waiting 2 weeks for a new episode gives you a sad, know that we drop bonus episodes all the time, like the off-format Crow's Nest and an interview series we call The Brig.
You can listen to Retro Reductopus on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or any app that's cool enough to carry the only show that celebrates all the things that make growing up awesome.
And welcome back. Now we are at the part of the show that hopefully you're here to listen to. We're about to discuss the Cryptids of Ohio. This is part of our brand new, or part of, I guess, my brand new series that we're going to do. We're going to go to all 50 states eventually, and hopefully get through all 50 states. Long as you guys enjoy listening to it, we will get through all 50 states. Exploring the cryptids of each state. We are starting this week, like I said, we're starting with Ohio because that is where I live. That is what would technically be my home state, as I've lived here for 11 years. I was born and raised, like I said earlier in the show, in Virginia, in the southeastern part of Virginia, on the coast, in Virginia Beach. I was born in Norfolk. I was raised in Virginia Beach. But here in Ohio, it's, if you've never been to Ohio, there's a lot of forest, there's a lot of farmland, there's a lot of weird stuff. One of the things in Ohio we have here in Dayton, especially, is we have Wright-Patt Air Force Base, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Everybody calls it Wright-Patt. They don't call it Wright-Patterson. They just call it Wright-Patt. And in one of the significant things of Wright-Patt Air Force Base is the rumors of when the UFO crashed in Roswell. Of course, you know, if it was an alien ship, if it was a UFO, what did they do with the bodies of the aliens? The rumor is they brought them here to Dayton, Ohio, in that. And that there is an underground bunker in Wright-Patt that houses the aliens. Of course, they've never said yes. They've never admitted to it. They probably will never admit to it. But that's one of the weird things. And we're going to do we're not going to talk about aliens, and we're not going to talk about that in detail this week, because that's going to have to be its own episode of Shivers. Is the aliens at, you know, that are rumored to be at Wright-Patt. There's a lot of weird stuff that happens over there. But we're focused this week on cryptids. Every state has their legends and their folklore and their own cryptids. Ohio has a couple of popular ones. I will say almost every state has Bigfoot sightings. That's probably the most famous cryptid out there. Is Bigfoot. Second, I would consider would be probably Mothman. I will say, for those, I'm pretty sure if you're listening to an episode on cryptids, you know what the Mothman is. You know who it is, or you know a little bit about him, and you know that the main focus of the Mothman story and the legend is and the sightings are in West Virginia. Um, that is where, because Point Pleasant, West Virginia, is where that bridge collapsed, and everybody for years was saying that the Mothman, um, the Mothman was seen as an omen, uh, and like a warning that the bridge was that something bad was going to happen. And then, of course, on Christmas Eve, I think it was Christmas Eve, the bridge collapsed during rush hour, killing a ton of people. Um, Well, Point Pleasant is basically almost like on the border of Ohio and West Virginia. So some of the Mothman sightings, and I did find some Mothman sightings here in Ohio. I'm not going to go through those because to me, Mothman is a West Virginia um, story. It is one that needs to be told when we do West Virginia. Um, and maybe even Illinois, because I know for a few years, for about a year or two there were some rumors that Mothman had been sighted in Chicago, um, mostly around I think it's Lake Superior is the lake that's in Chicago, but it was seen on the west side of Chicago and in on the shores of the lake. Uh, excuse me. But let's go ahead and cryptids. Basically, the definition of cryptids is animals or other creatures whose existence is only assumed or believed is based upon anecdotal or other non-compelling evidence. So basically, um, it's almost like ghosts. You can't. It's stuff you find you can't explain. Um, I'm gonna say right at the beginning, I am not an expert on cryptids or anything like that. I'm very interested in them. I've learned a lot of the stories. All of these were researched by me this week, um, that we're going to talk about. So hopefully you enjoy. Hopefully you heard and you feel like doing your own exploration into the cryptids of your state. Because we will go there. We will talk about them. Um, but the first story, we're going to go all the way to just south of Toledo, Ohio, for the Werewolf of Defiance. Um, on July 5th of 1972, it's 4 a.m. in northwestern Ohio. The moon is nearly full, and a railroad worker is connecting up train cars when he spots two huge hairy paws on the ground and looks up. What he will later tell the police he saw will spark a brief but intense bout of hysteria in the small town of Defiance. Defiance, Ohio is located around 50 miles south of Toledo. The town enjoys warm summers and freezing snowy winters. Welcome to Ohio. Um, Notable people from Defiance include a 24-time World Horseshoe Champion and actress Michelle Burke, who played Connie Conehead in the 1993 movie Coneheads. The town has a punk rock band named after it, Defiance, Ohio, and the City of Defiance website describes the town as a great place to live. I mean, it's not Toledo, so I've never been to Defiance, but I can tell you, as long as it ain't Toledo, it's probably nice. It was here where rumors of a man beast started circling in the summer of 1972. The story of the dog man of Defiance is always told in much the same way. Railroad worker Ted Davis was on the Norfolk and Western train tracks near 5th Street on July 25th when he encountered the creature. He was working when he spotted two large hairy paws on the ground in front of him. He raised his eyes and saw a huge hairy creature standing 6 to 8 feet tall, hunched over slightly, and wielding a large wooden board. The creature struck Davis on the shoulder before running off into the woods. A few days later, on July 30th, both Ted Davis and another railroad worker, Tom Jones, spotted the creature again. This time it was at a distance, and they saw the beast crawling through some bushes. The thing ran away when it was seen, and the men heard a scream coming from a nearby road in the direction that the creature had bolted. The men reported these incidents to the local police, who began an investigation. Less than a week after the initial encounter, a third sighting occurred. This time it was a grocery worker driving home late one night when a large dog-like creature ran across the road in front of him. These accounts were reported in two local newspapers, the Toledo Blade and the Defiance Crescent News. Once the story got out, people started feeling like the werewolf was behind every corner. A few frenzied reports of possible werewolf activity later, and then just as suddenly as it started, the werewolf fever died down and the reports stopped. The unusual thing that sets this sighting apart from other cryptid sightings of dogmen and werewolves was that these encounters were reported in newspapers and taken seriously by the police. While the police were not convinced that the assailant was a half-man, half-dog creature, they did believe that there was likely somebody going around in a mask or costume trying to scare people. Descriptions of the dogmen from various sightings describe it as tall, between 6 to 9 feet tall, very hairy all over, wearing dark blue jeans and a dark colored shirt, barefoot with large hairy paws and claws, bipedal but was often seen hunched over. It ran from side to side like a caveman in movies, from the Toledo Blade. Described as a man with an animal's head or up like an upright wolf. The main sources used for the story are the articles published in the Toledo Blade on August 3rd, 1972. I'm sorry. That's what the first article basically, or the first article was titled "Werewolf Case in Defiance Not Viewed Lightly by Police," written by James Stegall. It used direct quotes from the witnesses to report the incident, and although there are some inconsistencies even within this one article, if you'd like to read the article, though, I can give you the links if you guys really want to read the article. The feature in the Blade stated early on that one man, a train crewman switching trains, said that he was approached from behind and was struck on the shoulder. This man they were referring to, of course, was Ted Davis, which we know despite the Blade saying that the police were not releasing the name of the witnesses at this point because the other train crewman, Tom Jones, only saw the beast from a distance. Later in the same article, however, the newspaper used another quote from Davis after writing, "When he first confronted Mr. Davis, the creature ran away before he, Mr. Davis, could say anything. I was connected an air hose between two cars and was looking down. I saw these huge hairy feet, then looked up and he was standing there with a big stick over his shoulder. When I started to say something, he took off for the woods." It is unclear, therefore, whether or not the Wolfman actually assaulted Ted Davis or if it simply ran away after scaring the man. The unusual thing that sets this sighting apart from other cryptid sightings of dogmen and okay, yeah, God, what is this stupid thing doing? All right, hold on. I think I messed up. I think I went up instead of down. Hold on. Dead air is always great, isn't it? So what do you guys think of the Werewolf of Defiance so far? Is it real or is it just some guy in a costume? The follow-up article in the Blade was titled "Defiance Residents Suspicious of Their Werewolf," and goes on to say that most people in the area didn't believe it was a werewolf, but rather a man in a costume or just some nut running loose. This article also adds to the confusion by stating that one man said it hit him on the shoulder with a board, again referring to the Davis incident, as this was the only reported close encounter with this creature. There are also included interviews from some residents of Defiance in the area where the werewolf was reported to be seen, which gives us an idea of what the atmosphere at the time was like. Police were called to one woman's house adjacent to the train tracks. She had not seen it, but reports about it put her in a state of shock. They say he has hair all over and he's about 7 feet tall. From what I've heard, I can say this guy is ugly as hell. If I see him, the werewolf, the police are going to find out who he is. That's because they'll have to take him to the hospital to get the buckshot out. The Defiance Crescent News, another local newspaper, also reported published a report on the sightings on August 2nd, written by Ellen Armstrong. This news story took a less serious approach to the incidents, opening with a quote from the 1941 feature film The Wolf Man, and suggesting the police may be armed with silver bullets and sharpened stakes. This person also reported that one man was attacked and struck on the shoulder with a 2x4, making it unclear if Ted Davis was indeed assaulted or not. The Crescent News made statements such as 2 of the incidents occurred last week and one last night. None has happened during a full moon, obviously intending to further question the legitimacy of the claims by poking fun at the idea of a werewolf running around. But the first incident took place on July 25th, 1972, the day before a full moon. The Blade also wrote Ted Davis said that the large figure, which they said was between 6 to 8 feet tall, has appeared twice under a full moon, and quoted Ted Davis as saying, "When we're working in Defiance, the moon is full." The Crescent News also reported 3 more minor sightings on the 4th of August, but none of these complainants actually saw a werewolf, and it seemed to just be the product of panic in the community. One woman reported scratching at her door, telling the police that if whatever it was got inside, she would shoot it. This highlights the panic and hysteria that some people experienced, as a result of these sightings. Yet there have been many other residents who said that they hadn't heard anything about the werewolf or had heard very little and weren't concerned. Um, so yeah, I mean it's kind of weird. It really is. Uh, Hold on, I'm trying to find the other. Not what I want. There it is. All right. Sorry, I was trying to open a website for some sightings. But no, it really comes off as just some guy in a costume. Maybe someone just either crazy, old man living in the mountains, crazy guy living in the mountains, hermit or a mountain man just come down, pissed. Maybe Ted Davis pissed somebody off. They put on a dog suit and smacked him with a 2x4, so that nobody knew who he was. And yeah, but there's a couple of more recent ones, I guess you could say. Well, there's one here. This was from 2021. My girlfriend and I were driving down a remote country road in the early summertime, late one evening. She was the one driving, and I was in the passenger seat. The sun was setting behind us. We had just come around a curve when two does jumped out on the road in front of us. They, they acted like we weren't even there. They seemed to be focused on something else, so she jammed on the brakes and brought the car to a stop. I told her, "Man, that was close." That's when I looked into the rearview mirror to see if any more deer were coming. When I did that, in the red glow of the car's taillights, I saw something take a big step into the road from the brush that was on the side of the road. Whatever it was, it landed on its right leg, and when it did, good Lord. Whatever it was, it landed on its right leg when it did that. Looking at it in the rearview mirror, I could see it from its mid-thigh up to its stomach. In one motion, it then took another step forward and put what looked to be a hand down on the trunk of the car to apparently balance itself. When I saw that, I turned to look at my girlfriend. She was wide-eyed, her mouth was wide open, and she was white as a ghost. I could also see that her eyes were tearing up, so I looked back, but by that time it had already gone across the road. In an attempt to get a better look at this thing, I opened my door and got out of the car. When I looked, I could see that it was going down the embankment that was on the side of the road. Because of the brush, I could only see it from the armpits up. It was at least 7 feet tall and had very wide shoulders. Its shoulders were at least 1.5 times as wide as my shoulders, and I've got wide shoulders for a guy. From the last bit of daylight left, I could see it was black or dark brown in color and had pointed ears on top of its head like a dog. Its ears weren't overly wide or fuzzy. Its head was kind of dome-shaped, more or less, with flat sides. It acted like we weren't even there and seemed to remain focused on the deer. I was thinking, what in the world is this thing? It looked like some kind of werewolf or wolf man to me. It was way too big to be a person. Through that whole ordeal, I never did get a chance to see its face. In the area where we saw that thing, people have reported being paced in their vehicles going down the road by creatures that look like that, look like what we saw. So, yeah, the possibility of there being, I mean, dogmen are a thing. I've heard of dogmen, um, and that. So, I mean, yeah, it's a very good distinct possibility there's something in Defiance. Personally, I think Ted Davis pissed somebody off. They put on a dog suit, smacked him with a 2x4. I don't know if I believe he was attacked by a werewolf. Um, and it's just kind of weird. Someone possibly got drunk. Somebody, an old hermit living in the woods didn't like him being close to his house or his what he considered his property or anything, and just smacked him on the side. Um, we'll never know because that was like what 50 years ago, over 50 years ago. I don't even know if Ted Davis is still alive or not. But yeah, that's the Werewolf of Defiance. Again, let me know in the comments what you think. Whether if you believe it's genuinely a werewolf, if you think there's something out there, some kind of cryptid, a werewolf, a dog man, or anything, or if you think it was, if you're like me and you think it was just some guy in a dog suit or a costume, um, that Ted Davis either pissed off or was just somebody just trying to scare him away or something. Let us know in the comments on that. But it's an interesting story. If you're near Toledo, I don't have any addresses in that. There's a lot of news stories out there about it though. But yeah, there really hasn't been, outside of what I just read to you, there's not really been a sighting of this quote unquote werewolf since 1972. So take that for what it will. We're going to move on. Give me 1 second. And we're back. So we're going to move down a little further south, still on the western side. We're going to move down here almost to the outskirts of Dayton, where we're going to meet the Crosswick Monster. The Crosswick Monster is known from a single but extremely dramatic story from 1882, and it takes its name from the small town it was said to appear in near Waynesville on the banks of the Miami River in Warren County. Waynesville's not far from here. I don't even think it's half an hour. The exact site of where it happened, I think, would be really hard to find. But this is basically, there's only been one sighting of this monster. It is reptile-style creature, almost like a giant salamander or a lizard man. But basically, this is the following story. It is a Western Star article. This is basically an article taken from the Western Star from the incident back in May of 1882. So this will read as if it was written in 1882 because it was written in 1882. Waynesville, Ohio, May 29th. Although this is an old settled neighborhood and the primitive snakes in the main have long since disappeared, except for the black garter and rattlesnake and occasionally some other species, we are once in a while greeted with the report of some monster of this uncanny tribe. Now, I will also remind you this is 1882. This does not represent the writing in this article does not represent the views of the Owlite Network, Dorkening, anybody who sponsors this show, the Bloody Binge Movie Podcast. I'm going to read the article word for word. There is language in this article that will be offensive. I'm going to read it word for word. Again, this does not reflect at all on any of the host websites or host networks. All right. So for several years, it has been reported that the track of one above the town of unusual size had on different occasions been seen in the dust where it had crossed the pike. This report made the timid fearful, while the generality of the people did not seem to fear or care anything about it, and it has been reserved until yesterday to develop one of the most remarkable specimens ever seen in or out of snake season, and therefore the story thereof is so well authenticated that the more incredulous of the neighborhood on big snake stories are forced at last to lend an attentive ear. This is where it's going to get a little offensive. About 1 mile north of this place is a little village called Crosswicks, in which several colored families reside. Among the rest is John Lynch, who has two boys, Ed and Joe, aged respectively 13 and 11 years old. These boys were at a small creek on the south side of the village fishing yesterday. After sitting on the bank a short time, they heard quite a stir among some old reeds, grass, and brush behind them, and on looking round, they saw a huge monster approaching them rapidly. They screamed and, paralyzed almost with horror, started to run, when the snake, or whatever it might be, for they never saw aught like it before, came close up to the older one, and suddenly, throwing out two long arms and forelegs, seized the boy in its slimy embrace, simultaneously producing two more legs about 4 feet long, from some mysterious hiding place in its body, and dragged the boy some 100 yards down the creek to a large sycamore, 26 feet in diameter, at the base hollow, hollow and with a large opening on one side. Through this aperture, the monster attempted to enter with the boy, who by this time was almost dead with fright and unable to make any resistance. Three men, the Reverend Jacob Horn, George Peterson, and Alan Jordan, were quarrying stone a short distance above where the boys were fishing, and hearing their screams and seeing the creature yanking one off, hurried in an attempt to rescue the child. They reached the tree just as the snake, who, failing in its attempt to drag the boy into its den, became alarmed, probably by the cries made by its pursuers, unfastened its horrible fangs, and dropped the more than half dead child to the earth. The little fellow was picked up and carried home, and Dr. L.C. Lukens of Waynesville summoned to attend him. In the afternoon, about 60 men armed with clubs, axes, and such gathered around the sycamore tree and concluded to cut it down and destroy its fearful tenant. They began cutting when, becoming alarmed for his safety, the formidable snake leaped from the aperture, threw out its fore and hit hind legs, erected itself about 12 or 14 feet, and with the velocity of a racehorse crossed the creek and ran up a small hill, climbed over a rail fence, breaking it down, and continuing north a mile, followed by the pursuers, until he reached a hole in a large hill under a heavy ledge of rocks. Some of the men and dogs were so terrified at the beast's first appearance that they only thought of getting out of the way. But the braver portion followed until the frightful thing made good his retreat underneath the ground. It will be watched for and killed if possible. It is described as being from 30 to 40 feet long, 16 inches in diameter, and the legs 4 feet long and covered with scales, the same as the body. Feet about 12 inches long and shaped like a lizard, of black and white color with large yellow spots. Head about 16 inches wide with a long black forked tongue and the mouth inside deep red. The hind legs appeared to be used to give it an erect position and its propelling power in its tail. Dr. Lukin said this morning that the boy, his patient, was badly bruised and scratched, horribly frightened, and that he lay in convulsions and spasms until 3 o'clock this morning, when he fell asleep, but frequently wakened with fright and terror. Yet the doctor thinks he will recover in a few days. The foregoing is vouched for by the person whose names are given above, and many more can be given if necessary. Had hit sneeze button. The material points having been furnished your correspondent by Judge J.W. Keyes and one of our oldest and most influential citizens. What's particularly fascinating about the monster is its description. It was described as having various reptilian characteristics and was said to be 30 to 40 feet long, but it is never once referred to as a dinosaur of any kind, but instead as a snake with large arms and legs. So that the article's already ended. That would be absolutely terrifying. Uh, there's many things that it could have been. I know that a Gila monster is the largest reptile known on Earth, um, or largest lizard on Earth, rather. Uh, but the way they're describing it is bigger than that. Because Gila monsters are also poisonous. Uh, so it's definitely a weird thing. It could have been like could have been just one really large lizard or snake or something. I really. All right. But moving on, the word dinosaur was itself still a relatively new term back then. It was coined in 1841 by Sir Richard Owen, and yet that really seems to be what is being described throughout, with some of the details surprisingly up to date in the way we now think dinosaurs behaved, like its great speed and the fact that its propelling power was in its tail, suggesting that it balanced itself with its tail rather than dragging it behind itself, as was the prevailing view of how dinosaurs moved in the 19th century. So yeah, we have a lizard, a giant lizard living in Crosswick, Ohio. It was only ever seen the one time. After that, it was never. After the people chased it off, the posse, I guess, chased it off. Uh, it has never been seen again or heard from again. There's not been any more sightings that I've been able to find, um, except for that one. So if it was real, if it truly existed, which is definitely a distinct possibility, um, it didn't reproduce, and it's probably dead by now, considering that was 142 years ago. But yes, the Crosswick monster, again, not too far from here, relatively close. Um, So now we're going to move on to a big one. Welcome to the show, the most famous cryptid in the world, at least in my opinion, Bigfoot. Sasquatch, Grassman, Skunk Ape, whatever you want to call them, whatever your state calls them. We're going to talk about Bigfoot. There are tons of Bigfoot sightings in Ohio. Um, I have a friend who is part of, and he's been featured on the Travel Channel. He's been featured on Discovery. He has been featured. I don't know how many people remember a late night show called Coast to Coast AM. He's been on there. He's been on numerous podcasts. He is part of a group in Ohio called the Ohio Night Stalkers. And he's very smart when it comes to Bigfoot. He's had a lot of experience. He's had a lot of encounters. I will say he won't ever tell anybody. He wants to take me Bigfoot hunting, but he'll never tell anybody where he goes. Where what he calls his Area 51, where he gets most of his evidence. Him and his partner get most of their evidence and things like that, because it is on private property. And needless to say, when you're exploring, whether you're Bigfoot hunting or ghost hunting or doing paranormal investigations, or if you're part of the urban exploration movement that's going on, that people who explore abandoned buildings and that, get permission. If it's private property, please get permission. Because the monster the monster you're chasing, the ghost you're chasing, or anything, whatever you're chasing, is the least of your worries if you go onto the wrong person's property. And they have a shoot first, ask question later philosophy. In Ohio, we do have what is called the stand your ground doctrine, where if you feel your life is threatened, aka somebody you don't know trespassing on your property, you are 100% within your legal right to shoot that person and to quote unquote defend yourself in any way possible. So yes, please, 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 if you're going exploring, whether paranormal investigating, Bigfoot hunting, urban exploring, anything, please get permission of the people who own the land or own the property that you plan to investigate. It's really not that hard. Most of these people will let you do it, as long as you don't destroy something. But Bigfoot, Sasquatch, wherever you want to call him, in Ohio, he's basically referred to as Grassman in Ohio. In the northern part of Ohio, that is. Down here, it's. I've heard people talk about Bigfoot when they talk about their sightings and that. But as of August 2023, Ohio has the fourth most credible Bigfoot sightings in America with 318. Ohio is only behind Washington State with 707, California with 458, and Florida with 337 sightings. Illinois is number 5, but I was not able to find out how many sightings they've had. I saw a couple of reports where some reports have said Michigan is 5th, but I think that was before 2023, and I haven't seen any reports come out. But yeah, we're number 4 in incredible Bigfoot sightings in the country, which is pretty huge. According to Ohio County, the Ohio's Country Journal, Ohio's Bigfoot, known as the Grassman, is most likely to be spotted in the Appalachian foothills of eastern Ohio. The Hocking Hills, the Hocking Hills, Salt Lake State Park, and that. Hocking Hills actually has a Bigfoot festival that is scheduled for August 2nd and 3rd in Logan, Ohio this year. Well, they have like national Bigfoot hunters, people you see on TV and stuff like that. And Bigfoot researchers there doing talks. I believe my buddy Mike with the Ohio Night Stalkers did do a talk last year. Um, I haven't talked to him in a while because he's not on Facebook anymore. But yeah, he said it was a great time. So if you're able to go check that out in Logan on August 2nd through 3rd, basically out in the Hocking Hills. Um, but Bigfoot sightings were first documented in the 1830s, according to the Ohio State University. The creature is described as a mix between a gorilla and a human. In most reports, it has reddish brown fur and walks on two legs. The Grassman is essentially Northeast Ohio's version of Bigfoot, the legendary cryptid who has been found in nearly every U.S. state and dozens of countries around the world. As for the Grassman specifically, some people consider it a Bigfoot species, but the Grassman does resemble the typical. Yeah, some people. But the Grassman does resemble the typical Sasquatch descriptions you see. It's a tall, bipedal, human ape-like creature with a pointed, bulky head and fur that ranges in color from black and brown to gray. And in this case, the Grassman's unique trait and how it ultimately got its name is the hut-like nest it makes out of tall grass. Modern sightings for the Grassman date back to August of 1978. But what's really interesting is that Native Americans living in the Ohio grasslands spoke of bipedal creatures known to them as wild ones of the woods. Some suggest it is a subspecies of a broader Bigfoot species, while others say it's just Ohio's one and only Bigfoot creature. There have been many different reports of its appearance. Many describe it as 5 to 10 feet tall, 300 to 1,000 pounds, having a heavy odor, long black hair, and bright orange eyes. While there isn't much that differentiates it from Bigfoot, it has earned the specific name Grassman from the large den it supposedly makes out of grass and from its diet, which reportedly consists mainly of tall grass from the Ohio fields. Perhaps the most famous encounter with the Grassman is the one is Minerva, Ohio, was a series of events that has inspired multiple documentaries and online articles. Um, According to legend, in 1978, the Cayton family, it is spelled Cayton. I saw a couple of articles that call them the Clayton family, but most articles I found call them the Cayton family, Cayton. So that is what I'm going to call them, um, just because that is what I've seen it said in most of the articles that I read. But the Cayton family was terrorized by an unknown creature. The Cryptid Wiki describes how the grandchildren of Evelyn and Hal Cayton ran into their home screaming about a monster they had seen outside. Going out to investigate, Evelyn and Hal saw what the children had described. They claimed to have seen a giant, hair covered beast around 7 feet tall and 300 pounds by a gravel pit, pawing through some trash. Upon seeing the beast, the Cayton family fled their home. But this wasn't the last time they'd encounter Orange Eyes with the Grassman, which the Grassman is also nicknamed in the area. They were to have multiple encounters with it if the stories are to be believed. It would essentially stalk them in their home, looking at them through their kitchen window and from nearby hills. Police at this point were also involved in the investigation, and many didn't think it was a hoax, witnessing a lot witnessing a lot of the events themselves. Most interestingly, in some later encounters, it was said that witnesses saw multiple grassmen simultaneously, of varying sizes, supposedly confirming that there was more than one grassman and that they could be deemed a social species. These encounters attracted mass media attention and spawned multiple articles and myths surrounding the grassman. According to an article written by Ed Ballant, a Canton Repository staff writer, The Caton family was bombarded with attention following the event. In the article, Herbert Caton recalled, "One day there were 100 to 150 cars in my driveway, on my lawn, and lining up on the sides of the road. This attention made the family shy away from further publicity related to the Grassman." Really? Now deceased, or Evelyn and Hal Caton, now deceased, stuck to their story, and others still living who claim to have witnessed the early encounters haven't altered their accounts either. The outpouring of media spawned from the Caton encounter and many others after it has made it hard to find definitive information. I think I messed up doing my copy and paste or writing this article or writing this report. For example, in some articles, the Grassman is described as peaceful, having never truly bothered the Caton family. However, in others, it is described as one of the most dangerous and aggressive Bigfoot species and is rumored to have killed their dog days before the first encounter. Sightings continue to be reported frequently, with some attracting enough attention to be featured in local news articles. Hold on one second. Let me look something up real quick because I know there was a little bit more to that story, and I don't know why I would have not wrote it down. Uh, okay, here's a more in-depth story about it. Minerva is a small town population just under 4,000 people in Paris Township, Stark County, Ohio. It was here, actually 2 miles west of Minerva proper, on Lincoln Street Southeast, just off US Route 30, where Herbert Caton cleared an area near a deep pit by his home. His work done, he disposed of some garbage in the pit and settled in for a few days' rest after the job. A few nights later, Caton's grandchildren and their friends came running into the house, claiming to have seen a large, hairy monster rummaging around in the pit. The children were obviously terrified, believing a threatening mountain man or a crazed hermit was just outside their home. Hal Caton, his mother Evelyn Caton, and her daughter Vicky Keck went outside to investigate. They noted the dogs were going berserk as they walked up the small hill leading to the pit. As they approached the pit, they saw a large, thickly haired monster about 7 feet tall, weighing an estimated 300 pounds. Evelyn later commented, "It just stood there. It didn't move, but I almost broke my neck running down the hill." A few days later, Evelyn Caton saw the creature again picking through the garbage in the pit. She noted that the creature was bipedal, walked on 2 legs, and had hair covering its face. The creature's hair was thick, and although she could not make out any of its facial features, she recalled it had no visible neck. Again, her dogs went wild, tugging to get free from the chains that kept them bound to a nearby tree. Days after the second sighting, the family found one of their German Shepherd dogs dead with a broken neck. The dog's collar was found next to the dead dog, still attached to the chain. The other German Shepherd, Missy, appeared in an addled state. The Catons observed that Missy continued acting strangely for weeks after the incident, and out of character dug a huge 8-foot hole in the ground. Investigators later confirmed the existence of the hole and took evidentiary photographs of it. The family told little about the sightings to friends, but their problem publicly came to light on August 21st, 1978, around 10:30 p.m. The Catons and a few of their friends were relaxing on the back porch of their home. Behind the house was an old abandoned strip mine that had been out of use for years. Beyond the mine were dense, unpopulated, hilly woods that the family rarely ventured into. Near the mine was an old chicken coop. Amongst the chatter of conversation, someone heard an unusual noise near the chicken coop. The Catons and friends turned to see what the commotion was and noticed two pairs of yellow eyes peering back at them through the darkness. A close friend of the family, Scott Patterson, jumped into his car to turn the vehicle's headlights toward the glowing eyes. As he inched the car forward to better illuminate the pair of animals, the lights revealed a huge hairy creature that stepped in front of two feline-like creatures as if to protect them. The witnesses would later describe the creature as well over 7 feet tall, with black and brown matted hair that covered its head and face. The creature turned its attention to the idling automobile before running toward it. Seeing the creature quickly closing in on them, the witnesses ran into the home while Patterson tumbled from the car to join the fleeing party. Inside the home, the frightened witnesses, some of the women burst into tears, called the Stark County Sheriff's Department. While they huddled inside, waiting for the authorities to arrive, the creature peered through the kitchen window, illuminated by the back porch light. Patterson grabbed a loaded .22 caliber pistol while Evelyn snatched a .22 caliber rifle and began loading it. They noted that despite aiming their weapons at the creature, it stood by the window for almost 10 minutes, showing no fear of the guns. Nobody shot at the creature, but all were careful to keep it within the gun's sight. It didn't seem to want to bother anyone. It was just curious. We all felt it wanted to be friends. After several minutes, the creature turned and moved slightly from the window. The deputy sheriff James Shannon arrived about 15 minutes after the call from the Catons, about 5 minutes after the creature moved away from the kitchen window. Deputy Shannon, he later retired as captain of the force, interviewed the witnesses who described him as the two cats and monstrous creature. Years later, he recalled the incident. They heard something at the window, kind of clawing and pawing. From what I remember, I don't think this creature, whatever the hell it was trying to get in as much as it was saying, "Hey, look at me." Sheriff Shannon noted that the family's terror seemed genuine, and everyone's description of the incident matched perfectly. Shannon did not suspect a hoax, not even a hint of it. The family and friends had definitely seen something, but he could find no rational explanation for what they had seen. Shannon searched the home and noted an alarming strong stench near the kitchen window, described as an ammonia sulfur rotten egg smell. Additional deputies were called in and searched the area on horseback and in four-wheeled Dive Army surplus jeeps. During their 6-hour search, they found unusual footprints in the woods behind the home, measuring 14 to 16 inches long. Law enforcement wrote them off as bare footprints. When Mrs. Caton was asked if she thought the creature could have been a bear, she responded, "No, not unless they mutated." And regardless of the official conclusion, years later, Shannon would call the investigation the most bizarre investigation of his 30-year law enforcement career. And family friend Scott Patterson, who was skeptical of past sightings, admitted to reporters that he was now a believer. There was a second sighting on August 22nd, 1978. At around 9 p.m., Mrs. Mary Ackerman, daughter of Evelyn Caton, drove to the Caton home to pick up her daughter and friend. Mary turned into the Caton driveway and, to her surprise, saw the creature standing on top of the hill next to the abandoned strip mine behind the home. She described the creature as more than 6 feet tall, with stubby legs and hairy, indistinct features. Mary sat in the car and watched the creature until it finally turned and walked towards the woods behind the mine, according to Mary. It was shaped like a man, and it walked like a man. When a bear moves away, it goes away on all 4 feet. This swung up over the edge of the strip mine on 2 legs. The third Minerva sighting was on August 23rd, 1978. Hal Caton and his second experience with the Minerva monster on August 23rd, 1978 at around 11 p.m. Caton saw the creature appear outside his home and quickly grabbed a gun and fired it into the air. The creature turned and fled. Howell noted that the same night, as the family lay in bed, their home was pelted with rocks, which patterned and clanked on the metal roof of the home throughout the night. The final Minerva monster sighting happened on September 8th, 1978, around 6 p.m. The last Caton sighting of the Minerva creature occurred 2 weeks after their home was pelted relentlessly with rocks. Miss Ackerman saw two ape-like animals moving about near the strip mine. She thought at first they might have been in a tree, but could not tell because of the hillside angle and distance. She watched the creatures for a while until they disappeared into the woods. Virtually overnight, the Caton home turned into a veritable media circus. The Catons say the crowds outside their home grew so large they had to post no trespassing signs on fences to keep Bigfoot hunters off their property. However, not all Bigfoot hunters were so intrusive. Researcher Jim Rassiter of Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization, BFRO, arrived on the scene on September 9th, 1978. He returned for a follow-up investigation on September 30th and interviewed residents throughout the area. His first find was Henry Colt, who lived 5 miles east of Minerva on US 30. Colt told Rassiter that he too had seen the animal while on a walk through the woods near his home. Colt says the animal was squatting near a tree and made a noise that sounded to him like a very loud cough. He described the creature as large and hairy and bipedal. Next, Rassiter interviewed the Caton family about their encounter with the creature, and in his report he noted that the Catons and their friends had no reason to concoct a hoax, and seemed truthful and sincere with their stories. He also noted that the witnesses told the exact same story. They were very plain, simple, down-to-earth people, and you could tell something had happened that really frightened them. There were never any inconsistencies with their story. However, many times we went over it. Another researcher who accompanied Rassiter confirmed his assessment of the family's veracity. Some of the persons who we were interviewed separately and all described the beast identically. All hoped they would never see it again. To their surprise, the researchers found the Catons and many of their family friends were unfamiliar with the term Bigfoot. There's more Minerva sightings within weeks of the Caton sightings. Others in the area began reporting similar encounters with the Minerva monster. One man saw a large hairy creature cross Route 30 near the Caton's home. It was a fog-shrouded night, and he was driving down US 30, and all of a sudden, this thing darted out in front of his vehicle. Another sighting occurred on Liberty Road, Church Road, southeast, where a woman reported hearing strange noises in the woods surrounding her home. She described the sound as a cat fight or a woman's terrified shriek. She reported to the authorities that whatever was making the uncanny noises had been harassing her for several months. 58-year-old David White said he heard mysterious sounds behind his Paris Township home, located at the rear of the Skyland Mills Mobile Home Park, near the Caton's property. Similar to the Liberty Church Road report, he described mysterious sounds echoing from the woods next to a small lake. It's a blood-chilling sound, a curdling sound. It will scare the hell out of you. His wife, Connie, confirmed hearing the strange noises. In the years following the Caton incidents, reports of the Minerva monster arrived from the neighboring counties of Logan and Union. On June 24th, 1980, Mrs. Donna Riegler, a legal secretary from Union County, was driving home work on a stormy day. It was hot and lightning flashed in the distance. Riegler slowed her car as she crossed over a set of rough railroad tracks and saw something lying in the road ahead. The creature appeared to be hunched over, and at first she thought it was a dog. Then as the creature rose to two legs, she felt it must be a man. Then the creature turned to face her. She saw it. It was a huge hairy creature. It stared at her and held its hands out to her, palms up. She drove away quickly and stopped at the first house she came to. Inside the stranger's home, she collapsed, breaking down in tears. So many years after their infamous encounter, though, with the Minerva monster, the beleaguered Catons never recanted their story. The family was hassled by neighbors who claimed Catons were seeing things. Locals harassed Catons at a high school football game when the crowd stood and began chanting Bigfoot as they entered the stadium. Despite the alienation of their neighbors, the Catons refused to bend. Researchers who followed up on the story several years later at, after the events noted that back in 85, when I spoke to the family again and again in 91, their reports were the same, practically word for word, as they were in 1978. If you had a list of top 10 sightings in Ohio based on credibility or believability, Minerva would be easily be in the top 3. So what's happened to the Caton family? Today, the Caton family continues to live on the property, even although Evelyn and Herbert Caton have both died. Family members have installed fences to keep curiosity seekers away. They exhibit much skepticism when it is suggested that the animals they saw was Bigfoot. They continue to denounce any publicity and insist that they do not want public attention on the case. There's a couple of articles in this story and everything, but yeah, the Minerva monster is probably one of the most believable stories I've read and I've researched on here. I wish I would have did a better job writing about it, but unfortunately, I left a bunch of important things out. But the Minerva monster is like I said, it is the most believable story that I've seen. From what everybody has said, the reporters, the police, that this family has no reason to lie, and they don't seem like they're lying. So, what is in the woods in Minerva, Ohio, or what is in that old mine? Well, we may never know. But that's only one portion of all the sightings in Ohio. Because there's sightings in the Cuyahoga State Park. According to Paul Seaburn from Mysterious Universe, the first Grassman sighting by modern people happened in 1869. This early sighting reported a 9-foot-tall bipedal ape-like creature who was seen eating grass and wheat. Another Grassman sighting was reported later in the 1800s, according to the Cryptid Wiki. During this encounter with the creature, Grassman attempted to throw a man out of his carriage. The creature retreated when the man's daughter, who was riding as a passenger, began throwing stones at it. Yeah, I mean, I think those are really the only two that I found in the Cuyahoga State. Cuyahoga State Park would be up near Cleveland and like Cedar Point and that. But yeah, I mean, state parks would be perfect. A perfect hiding spot for Bigfoot. Who and I'll tell you right now, I call Bigfoot the world's greatest hide and seek player, because you know, nobody can find him. There's sightings, but nobody can ever actually find them. See, we're gonna some more Grassman sightings. An anonymous witness reported their 1995 encounter with the Grassman to the Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization. On July 4th, 1995, 3 men decided to go for a night hike along the railroad that runs parallel to Riverview Road near Brandywine Ski Resort in Cuyahoga Valley National Park. Around 11:30 p.m., the 3 hikers heard a high-pitched scream from the west, which they described as sounding similar to a coyote or a peacock, but raspier. The sound only lasted 5 seconds, and the hikers didn't think much of it, assuming it to be from some ordinary animal. After hiking further through a marshy clearing, they headed into a heavily wooded area for several minutes before deciding to head back. Upon re-entering the clearing, another high-pitched roaring sound came from the center of the marshy area of the clearing. This time the sound lasted longer, about 8 to 10 seconds, and sounded like it was very close by, about 50 to 75 feet away. Just then, a very large creature charged through the marsh right at the hikers. The creature, according to the witnesses, was bipedal and swung its arm as it ran through the water of the marsh. It moved extremely quickly for being chest deep in mucky water. The hikers ran at full speed back to their car. The creature stayed near the edge of the swamp, and the 3 hikers were able to escape unharmed. That would be absolutely terrifying. It really would be. That's the thing. Some of the videos, some of the sounds I heard, some of the videos, and some of the stories that my friend on the Ohio Night Stalkers um, has told me and talks about, they're terrifying. It's they have rocks thrown at them, and I'm not like talking like little tiny rocks, big ass rocks thrown at them. Um, he's actually been chased. He's seen it, and he's been chased by what he calls a Bigfoot. Um, Local Bigfoot researcher Charlie Page claims to have obtained an audio recording of Grassman's howl in 2015, according to Mysterious Universe writer Paul Seaburn. This audio clip was recorded in the Cuyahoga Valley National Park near the I-271 overpass that borders Cuyahoga and Summit counties. Page recorded the sound from the scenic Hemlock Point, where he picked up multiple howl sounds from different directions, but seemingly from the same species. According to a video published on YouTube by the user Find Bigfoot, a Grassman may have been recorded on video in February of 2017. The uploader of this video believes that this could very well be a real Grassman or Sasquatch because of the creature's posture, gait, and general behavior. He also believes that the creature resembles an authentic Sasquatch because it has a coned head and long arms. He feels that this is the best footage that he has seen of Bigfoot or Bigfoot-like creatures in several years. I was not able to download the video though, but in the video it does look like a man in an outfit to me. It doesn't look legit at all, but um, I could be wrong. Just to me, it looks like a guy in an outfit. So there's a lot of belief when it comes to Bigfoot. Some people believe uh, that it's like basically just an animal, or I guess a species of animal that lives in the woods that was never discovered and never either domesticated or um, humanized. Um, you also have there's also very good possibilities that people who see Bigfoot, they're seeing just wild people. You really just don't know. Some people believe that they are aliens. I have met people and I've talked to people who believe that they are an alien species put here on Earth. And then there's a lot of people who believe that they've been around for centuries, that they're basically just like Neanderthals almost, and that they could also possibly be Native American curses. Um, I mean, we'll never know unless we actually find one and study it, you know, like we do all the other animals. But in the 1700s, Native Americans living in the Ohio grasslands spoke of a species of bipedal ape men who lived in the area, according to the Cryptid wiki. They called these creatures the wild ones of Ohio, or I'm sorry, the wild ones of the woods. These Native Americans would leave out food to the wild ones as a means of keeping peace with the creatures. Could the wild ones of the woods spoken of by Native Americans be the same creatures as the Grassman? Um, yeah, It's very possible. I mean, we don't know how long they've been around. We don't know how many there are. We don't know where they live. We don't know what happens to the dead, what they do to the dead. We just don't know. Um, Many cryptozoologists believe that the grassman is a separate species from Bigfoot. Grassman's diet allegedly consists mainly of grass and wheat, while Bigfoot has a fondness for apples. I don't know how the hell you know that he has a fondness for apples. Grassman is also apparently often seen in groups, unlike the more solitary Bigfoot. Unlike Bigfoot, Grassman is also often associated with a foul odor, similar to that of the skunk ape of Florida. Grassman is also purported to be more violent than other similar species. Um, so yeah, it you always get different stories when it comes to this kind of stuff. Some people, some people say how cruel, mean, vicious that Bigfoot is. A lot of times people will say how nice and sweet he is. I bring your attention to the movie, to the 1980s movie of Harry and the Hendersons, where Harry's dad painted, the big because of the Bigfoot hysteria going on. Harry's father, or not Harry's father, George Henderson's father, um, painted it as this wild, evil, vicious thing, versus how Harry actually was, which was sweet, nice, and kind. Um, but it's one of the things where if you see something like that, you're gonna run. It's natural. It's that fight or flight instinct. Because you're gonna be scared, and it's perfectly fine. You're scared of the unknown. That's essentially what it is, because nobody knows. Nobody can know. But moving on, we're going to move to the cedar bog monster this time. We're staying with Bigfoot. We're just going to go with different sightings and what they call them in that. But this one's a little more interesting because in 1942, the Ohio Historical Society officially listed Cedar Bog as a nature preserve, the first of its kind in the state. Today, approximately 1/4 of all the plant species in Ohio call Cedar Bog, along with over one call Cedar Bog home, along with over 100 species of birds and many rare reptiles and fish. And if the stories are to be believed, the bog also has one other infamous resident, Bigfoot. Shortly after Cedar Bog, which is actually a fen, opened, locals began whispering about spotting a huge ape-like creature walking along Woodburn Road, which runs alongside the bog. Some claimed it was Bigfoot himself, while others said it was an albino relative. One thing they all agreed on, though, was that this creature was too big to be a man and was unlike anything they had ever seen before. Sometime thereafter, a long metal fence topped with barbed wire was erected along both sides of Woodburn Road. Most people just assumed it was designed to protect the bog by keeping people out. But there are some who believe even today that this fence was placed there to keep Bigfoot from getting out. Regardless of which is true, we invite you to take a trip down Woodburn Road some dark night and see for yourself if you don't feel like something is standing on the other side of the fence, just beyond the reach of the car's headlights, watching you. All right, so according to legend, a group of teenagers from Kettering decided to venture outside the city on an impromptu camping trip. Okay, here's the thing: Kettering is a city right now. It's literally, I live right outside of Kettering. Kettering is in basically south of Dayton. The Cedar Bog is in Urbana, Ohio, which is probably about 45 minutes, about 30 minutes north, east of the area we live in. So it's not that weird that a group of kids from Kettering want to go camping. But they decided to go outside the city on an impromptu camping trip. The spot they chose to camp was was alongside a creek at the far end of a large field. It was a decision they would soon regret. The following morning, a car was found near the preserve. Inside, there was nothing but a trail of footprints leading from the car that led directly into the nature preserve. And inside the nature preserve, nothing. Nothing forevermore. The local police traced the car to a local teenager, and his parents confirmed he went out that night with two of his friends into the preserve for a camping trip, but they were never seen again. No remains were ever found, and creatures that could kill and consume 3 human beings, well, they just don't exist. They just didn't exist inside the nature preserve. Clearly, something terrible happened to those kids. The locals were sure of one thing, however. It was the monster of the bog. It is said that they were all attacked and killed during the night by a hideous creature, nicknamed the Boggy Creek Monster. True or not, the teenagers were never seen or heard from again. Skeptics claim that there is no Boggy Creek Monster and point to the fact that the name comes from a fictional monster created for a low-budget horror movie from the early 70s, The Boggy Creek Monster. However, it should be noted that the movie was indeed based on an actual monster, the Fouke monster, which was said to have terrorized the residents of Fouke, Arkansas in the 1960s. So perhaps more than one of these creatures existed, and one of them chooses to make its home alongside a creek on the outskirts of Kettering. It's not on the outskirts of Kettering. 1945, on a cold night, a car was discovered near the nature preserve, and upon inspection, nothing was found. Okay, we already read that. Hold on, I'm trying to find my spot. Yeah. Something terrible had occurred to the children, and the locals were convinced that the monster of the bog was responsible. Soon after, a tall chain link fence. We already read all that. The search for the end. Here we go. People suspected that it was connected to the missing teenagers and the alleged monster rather than just keeping the deer off the road. The search for the missing individuals eventually went cold. Many people remained suspicious of the fence and the mystery that lay within, convinced that there was something to be found. Despite the intention of the authorities to keep things quiet, word soon spread throughout America that something strange was happening in the bog. Monster hunters began to arrive in droves, parking their cars near the chain link fence in groups of hundreds each month, hoping to catch a glimpse of whatever was inside. Rumors began to circulate that the fence was meant to keep something in rather than keep people out. Despite the fact that 3 teenagers had gone missing and were possibly attacked by a strange creature, local teenagers were undeterred and continued to frequent the area, hoping to catch a glimpse of the creature for themselves. Some did, and not long after the first incident, 2 more teenagers parked on the road for a romantic adventure. Exactly what you think. They were startled by a rustling sound coming from the thicket behind them. The boy assumed it was his girlfriend's anxiety and urged her to ignore it, but the noise continued to grow louder. They wondered what could be out there. Slowly, they lifted their heads from the back seat and peering through the rear window, and they eventually saw it. The woods behind the creature cast an eerie shadow, but the couple could still make out the extraordinary figure standing 10 feet away from their car. The creature was immense, towering at 7 feet, and it stood there, motionless, fixedly gazing at the couple. The stench emanating from the creature was truly repugnant. The naked couple, yes, they were naked, jumped with fright, and the young boy floored it, getting the hell out of there with haste a little way down the road, where at once the young girl insisted they get dressed and that her boyfriend should take her home. It proved one of two things. One, something bizarre was out there. And two, that a young boy in Ohio never lost his virginity because of Bigfoot. That would be hilarious. I mean, scary things in Cedar Bog. I haven't been to Cedar Bog. I need to go look. But Urbana's a weird city as it is. It's a country city. There is not much there except for farmland. It's just north of Springfield, which Springfield in itself is a very creepy ass city. Mostly because of all the meth heads, but there's a lot of abandoned houses in Springfield that are old and just creepy. But yeah, I'd say the possibility of the Cedar Bog monster being real is like I'm 90%. The stories make sense, they're very well worded. Um, but yeah, imagine being that couple, doing the back of the car, doing your thing, and you just happen to pop your head up and there's fucking Bigfoot 10 feet away from you. We do not have any reports whether or not that young man ever did lose his virginity. But moving on, now we have the mysterious Limburger. 1980, long after a romantic night was ruined, or as romantic as romantic as losing one's cherry in the back of a car can be for a young woman, a Bell Fountain farmer had a most bogus of encounter. At around 11 at night, he was greatly disturbed by his dog barking into the darkness. Something he never did unless something had spooked him. The farmer went outside to check and what was wrong, and there, oh my God, what the hell is that? It was huge, a massive ape-like creature spooked by the shocked farmer running away into the night, leaving behind his 16-inch footprints and once more that strange odor. One which the farmer rather wonderfully described as smelling like Limburger cheese on a hot muffler. I guess there's not a lot to do in Ohio, but there really is. I mean, there is, but you got to find it. This is rural Ohio, and this is a scary place. It really is. It's dark. It is dark. They don't believe in street lights up here, for the most part, especially out in the interstates or any kind of highways or state routes and that. The country roads are tight and narrow, flanked by mighty woods. The darkness truly terrifying, and truly one's mind can run amok. Yes, it can. To see or believe, one has seen something so out of the ordinary. Sightings by good, honest folk who are completely trustworthy, even if they like cheese on a muffler, speaks highly of the congested mind in such a primeval, frightful situation. I hear a noise. I see a shadow. I know what I see. Bigfoot. But even today, sightings of a mysterious creature in Cedar Bog continue. We're gonna go back to Cedar Bog. While the locals are uncertain about what exactly lurks there, most are convinced that something strange resides within the preserve. Chris Erter, a local resident, lives on Cedar Creek Road, which runs through his property, and he frequently hears reports of strange sightings in the woods. Chickens and cats often go missing, leading many to believe that the monster is responsible. The creature appears in the spring and fall, and local farmers frequently complain about bizarre occurrences on their farms. There is even an Aztec mound in the area, which has been featured on ghost hunting television shows. I've not seen them. Visitors can now access the preserve through a boardwalk and visitor center. So yeah, Cedar Bog I think that there's a lot of the only other part of the state I think, or I would believe, would have more sightings and more activity would be Salt Lake Fort Park and or Salt Lake Park, and the Hocking Hills. Appalachia, Appalachia's scary as it is. But we're going to move on now to the monster of Charles Lake. I don't think there's many more Bigfoot stories. In 1959, 3 young men from Ohio claimed to have had a face-to-face encounter with one of the most bizarre critters ever to emerge from a seaweed-strewn lake bed. An encounter so brief and perplexing that even most cryptozoologists, don't know what to make of it. Much like its highland counterparts on the flip side of the Atlantic, Ohio proves to be one of the preferred stomping grounds in the U.S. for more than a few unique species of aquatic-based. Really? Okay, so I think we're done with Bigfoot. Actually, I thought the monster of Charles Lake was a Bigfoot. Apparently, it is not. Hold on, let me look at this. Okay, yeah, then no, we're done with Bigfoot. My fault. I thought this was still Bigfoot. But yeah, Bigfoot. I believe in Bigfoot. I believe it's one of them things like with aliens. It's very hard to say Bigfoot doesn't exist. We still have acres and acres and miles of country of backwoods that we have not investigated. We have not explored. The country, America, Canada, Alaska, it's so big, it's so vast. I don't think it's possible that we've explored every inch of it. And just like saying there's no alien, there's no, not really aliens, but no life on another planet. It's very hard to say that there is no Bigfoot. There's no evidence that says there's no Bigfoot. There's no evidence that there is. But it's a very, very possible. That's the thing. You got to admit, it is very possible that there are creatures living in the middle of the woods, deep in the woods, that exist. If you look, if you study, the news and things like that, and see all these fish, the deeper we go into the ocean, the more different kinds of species of fish and weird looking fish we're finding at the bottom of the ocean. So if we're finding those in the bottom of the ocean that we're just now starting to explore, what makes us think that there's nothing in the woods? There's nothing deep in the woods, in caves. Nobody really. It's very hard to explore a cave to the very bottom or the very end of it. You never know what it is, and it's very hard to get back. But there's nothing to say there isn't. So yeah, Bigfoot is up there in one of those things that I believe in. Yes. But we're going to move on to the orange-eyed monster of Charles Lake. In 1959, 3 young men from Ohio claimed to have had a face-to-face encounter with one of the most bizarre critters to ever emerge from a seaweed-strewn lake bed, and an encounter so brief and perplexing that even most cryptozoologists don't know what to make of it. Much like its highland counterpart on the flip side of the Ohio proves to be one of the preferred stomping grounds in the U.S. for more than a few unique species of aquatic-based cryptids. Far and away the most notorious of these beasts are the small bipedal frog-like fiends known as the Loveland frogmen, but the Charles Mill Lake Reservoir, located about 100 miles away from Loveland, Ohio, in Mansfield, is said to boast its very own aquatic monster. We will talk about the Loveland frogmen. That is going to probably end up being our last monster when we talk about them, get to them. But nestled in between Cleveland and Columbus, the Mill Lake Reservoir was constructed in 1935 by damming the Black Fork of the Mohican River. Known for its voluminous catfish population, the lake is also said to be the home of a unique and ostensible amphibious creature, the likes of which has only been seen once, and is quite unlike any other cryptid ever reported. This odd and harrowing encounter occurred on March 28, 1959, when 3 teenage buddies, Denny Patterson, Wayne Armstrong, and Michael Lane, claimed to have had a run-in with one of the flat-out weirdest varmints that anyone has ever chronicled, at least in Ohio. The young men testified that they were cavorting near Ruggles Road near the swampy shores of the Charles Mill Reservoir at night when they saw a strange 7-foot-tall being rise up from the black water in front of them. The petrified boys watched in horror as this colossal creature towered above them. Later, they would describe the beast as being a huge, armless humanoid with luminous green eyes and large webbed feet. Needless to say, the teens wasted no time in exiting the scene and were swift to report their unusual encounter. This description of a humanoid creature rising from a murky lake is very much like eyewitness accounts of the vicious Thetis Lake monster, which hailed from Canada in August of 1972. Unlike the quasi-reptilian visage of the Thetis Lake monster, this creepy manifestation was falls somewhere in the murky gray area between the creature from the Black Lagoon, a hairless ape man, and the unknown. Seems quite unlike any other creature ever reported. In fact, this thing is so bizarre that it's more like an amalgam of the Swamp Thing and a frightening early design for Sid and Marty Krofft's Sigmund the Sea Monster than a genuine biological entity. When local authorities made their way back to the reservoir to see what the entire hubbub was all about, they discovered a series of tracks that resembled the footgear worn by skin divers. Along the shore, despite this apparent confirmation that something with large webbed feet was skulking along the edge of the lake, there were no subsequent reports of this armless beast with glowing eyes. Esteemed cryptozoologist Loren Coleman even chronicled this bizarre aquatic humanoid case in his 1985 book, Curious Encounters. He described the being thus: a green-eyed, 7-foot-tall, seemingly armless humanoid seen late in March 1959 by Michael Lane, Wayne Armstrong, and Dennis Patterson came out of the lake and left behind tracks that resembled the footgear worn by skin divers. The thing was seen again in 1963 and described as luminous and green-eyed. I examined the site of these encounters and can testify to the Charles Mill Lake's swampy affinities. Certainly a good home for a Black Lagoon beast. It bears noting that the Charles Mill Lake is allegedly the stomping grounds for another terrifying beast, which is also said to have a pair of iridescent eyes. The creature in question is a large hairy humanoid which was said to have been driven out of its sewer tunnel home near a Cleveland's Riverside Cemetery, whereupon it began stalking the lovers' lanes surrounding Charles Mill Lake. This filthy beast, which in many ways except pigmentation resembled the legendary Murphy's Board mud monster, was notable for what eyewitnesses claimed were its glowing orange eyes, hence its designation as Orange Eyes. But it goes without saying that the legend of the Charles Mill Lake monster and Orange Eyes have become intertwined somewhat over the years, a fact which is understandable considering they are both huge, vaguely humanoid beasts that bear self-illuminated eyes and ostensibly share the same habitat. Nevertheless, the distinctions between the creatures are clear. The Mill Lake monster is an armless, hairless, ostensibly amphibious, green-eyed monster with big webbed feet, while Orange Eyes is more akin to a prototypical Bigfoot, in that it's a large, hairy, ape-like creature with 2 arms and orange eyes. Many have rightfully pointed out that the so-called glowing eyes seen on the creatures may well be mere reflections caused by flashlights or headlight beams, and these reflections can change color depending on the angle and source light. In the fascinating case of the as yet unclassified creature known as the Dover Demon, observers who described a tiny, hairless, melon-headed critter claimed that its eyes were also luminescent and shined multiple colors depending on where and under what lighting conditions it was seen. There have been no confirmed reports of the Charles Mill Lake monster since 1959, although many, including Coleman, credit it with what is an apparent ape-like Orange Eyes encounter from 1963. However, now and again, folks from that region still claim to discover strange tracks that resemble huge, wet feet near the boggy coast of the reservoir. So this is a monster. This is a cryptid that hasn't been seen in at least 60 some years. The fact that only 3 people saw it and 3 of them were teenagers at the time kind of puts a little bit of skepticism toward the encounter. But that was I think I now I know why I put it with the Bigfoots, because it kind of is a Bigfoot and it kind of isn't, but it's in the same category as bipedal cryptids. But yeah, Bigfoot all over the state of Ohio, all over this country, in all honesty. I have a feeling we'll be talking more about Bigfoot in the upcoming weeks or in the upcoming episodes as we explore the other 50 states. But moving on, we're going to Lake Erie for Bessie the Lake Erie Monster. For years now, people have been reporting an unknown creature named South Bay Bessie, or just plain Bessie, in Lake Erie. It is described as gray snake-like and 30 to 40 feet long. Those sightings have been logged in recent years. The monster is known mostly from historical accounts. For a number of years, vague stories about huge serpents have come with each recurring season from Dominion, Canadian shores, and now at last the existence of these fierce monsters is verified and the facts so well established that it can no longer be questioned, wrote a reporter in the July 8th, 1898 edition of the Daily Register of Sandusky, Ohio. The monster reported was able to live both on land and in water. It was a fierce, ugly, coiling thing. Call it a snake or what you will. It was said to be 25 to 30 feet long and a foot in diameter. By 1912, the monster had become the butt of local practical jokes. A Daily Register article published in the spring of that year accounts an encounter between Kelly's Island residents and the large sea monster which broke through a sheet of lake ice and headed for shore. Witnesses described a black object with huge head, gaping mouth, and a row of teeth. The story's last line read, April 1st, its date of publication and the reason for the tale. Other times the newspaper was at a hoax's receiving end. The July 22nd, 1931 edition of the Register stated, Sandusky was agog Tuesday night because it was reported that the sea serpent, supposed to be in the waters of Sandusky Bay, had been captured. A New York Times reporter who happened to be visiting the town that day picked up the story as the story had it. 2 vacationing men from Cincinnati saw the sea serpent while on a boat on Lake Erie. The 2 frightened men clubbed the animal into submission, brought it aboard, and placed it in a crate. Harold Madison, curator of the Cleveland Museum of Natural History, journeyed to Sandusky and pronounced the sea serpent an Indian python. The 2 men quickly left town. Further investigation revealed that the men, one of who had family ties in Sandusky, worked for a touring carnival. Still, stories of the monster persisted either in spite or because of the hoaxes perpetrated in its name. Sightings were reported in 1960, 1969, 1981, 83, 85, and 89. A flurry of reports occurred in 1990, including a sighting by 2 Huron firefighters. And by 1993, monster mania was in full swing. National media grabbed hold of the story. The Wall Street Journal took a cynical approach to the sightings. It ran an article published on July 29th characterizing the excitement as a clever marketing ploy to draw tourists into the small town of Huron as they sped towards Cedar Point. Huron did take a particular interest in the beast, and the city soon produced a crop of cryptozoologists and declared itself the national live capture and control center for the Lake Erie monster. Tom Solberg of the Huron Lagoons Marina offered a $100,000 reward for the safe and unharmed capture of the beast. That reward has never been claimed. David Davies, a fisheries biologist for the Ohio Division of Wildlife, spends much of his time on the lake. It's probably something closely related to a dinosaur. It looks like a brontosaurus, don't you think? He joked when a reporter asked him what the Lake Erie monster could be in his serious In his serious moments, he thinks the animal is a large specimen of the lake sturgeon. Lake sturgeon can grow to be 150 years old, exceed 7 feet in length, and weigh more than 300 pounds. Caviar comes from the eggs of the sturgeon. The Sandusky Lake shore was home to so many lake sturgeons in the 1800s that it was known as the caviar capital of North America. The sturgeon was fished nearly out of existence on Erie, but is now making a comeback. In the summer of 1998, a fisherman off New York's Lake Erie coast caught a 7-foot 4-inch, 250-pound sturgeon. They do look prehistoric, Davies said. In fact, they very much resemble their prehistoric ancestors. Where other fish have scales, the lake sturgeon has bony plates, and the plates give the fish a reptilian, leathery look. The sturgeon is a bottom feeder, though it rises occasionally to the surface of the water. Its tail could conceivably be interpreted as the neck of a great sea monster when it rises over the water's surface. Its fins could be imagined as its undulated body if you happen to have an extremely overactive imagination. The lake sturgeon is considered endangered in Ohio, and the Wildlife Division has implemented a program to tag and record sturgeon remaining in the lake. Sorry for that. There are presently no plans for tagging Bessie in the works. This was a letter sent to Weird Ohio. Weird Ohio, Weird U.S. books are awesome. They're great. They're quick, short stories. But this was a letter sent to Weird Ohio about Bessie. Dear Weird Ohio. Hold on 1 second. Sorry, I had to cough there. I have a boat on Lake Erie, and I often fish near Vermilion. And I can tell you that there is a monster in that lake and near that shore. Many people have seen it over the years, and I am one of those people. The first thing I will say is that I know the town of Huron has tried to make money off this monster. They call it Bessie and try to get tourists to come look for it. I think this is very irresponsible and downright dangerous. The thing I saw was vicious and dangerous. Giving it a cute name and trying to get people, let alone kids, to come and search for it is only going to lead to a tragedy. I am a fishing fanatic. I've got an 18-foot Boston whaler that some friends and I use constantly in the summers. Pretty much every weekend or free day I'm not working, I'm out on Lake Erie. 2 summers ago, I was out on the lake more than usual. I had just gone through a pretty messy divorce, lost custody of my kid, and was in danger of losing my job. I was having a lot of trouble sleeping and found myself spending most of those sleepless nights alone on my boat, either fishing or just cruising the lake, thinking about how rotten my life was. In early June, I was having one of those nights where I was just cruising the lake. I anchored the boat a few hundred yards offshore and was just lying on my back drinking a few cans of beer. As sad as it is in hindsight, I found that the combination of the rocking of the boat and a few beers was one of the only surefire methods of overcoming my insomnia. I don't know how many mornings that summer I woke up fully clothed on the deck of my boat with cans scattered about. It wasn't the happiest period in my life. This particular night, I was awakened from my slumber by something rubbing against the bottom of the boat. The noise and the impact woke me, and I immediately heard a noise that I find hard to describe. It was the rushing of water, followed by the slap of something against the surface of the lake. I sprang up and grabbed the lantern, which I always left burning, in the bow of the boat, so that no other vessels would plow into me at night. Then I lunged to the gunwale and held the light over the water to have a look. What I saw I will never forget. Before I go any further, let me say that I was not drunk when I saw what I saw. You always got to make sure you say that. I had been sleeping for at least 3 hours and I had only 4 beers. I am sure what I am about to describe is in no way the product of any alcohol-induced hallucination. There was a long, thick creature a few feet beneath the keel of my boat. All exaggeration aside, this thing was at least 20 feet long, and it darted with incredible speed away from my skiff as I struggled to make out its form beneath the inky black surface of the water. When it was about 30 feet away from my vessel, the beast reared its body up out of the lake. Although it was still dark out, it was a clear night with a full moon shining down on the still surface of the lake. Because of this fact, I was able to clearly make out the long serpentine body of the animal and its large round head. That was all I saw before it submerged again and disappeared. There is no doubt in my mind that the thing intentionally slammed into my boat. The first instinct I had when I saw it was that I had invaded its territory and it was letting me know. Perhaps like a common eel, it had been attracted to the glow of my lantern. I cannot say for sure, but that was the last night I ever spent alone on Lake Erie. I've only gone fishing at night a few times in the past 2 years and never by myself. Needless to say, the sleeplessness of that summer only got worse after I looked that monster in the eye. Thankfully, since then, my life has returned more or less to normal. I've remarried, see my kid often, and have a new job much better than the one I was so worried about back then. When I think back to that summer, the only really terrifying aspect of it I haven't managed to reckon with is the mystery of what I saw that night. So the first recorded sighting of Bessie occurred in 1793, and more sightings have occurred intermittently and with greater frequency in the past 3 decades. While shooting at ducks north of Sandusky, Ohio, in 1793, the captain of the sloop Felicity startled a large snake-necked creature described as more than a rod, 16 and a half feet in length. In July of 1817, the crew of a schooner reported a 30 to 40-foot long serpent, dark in color. Later that year, another crew spotted a similar animal, this time copper colored and around 60 feet in length. This time they shot at it with muskets, which had no visible effect. A third 1817 incident took place near Toledo when French settlers, two brothers named Dussault, encountered a huge monster on the beach, writhing in what they took to be its death throes. The brothers described it as between 20 and 30 feet in length and shaped like a large sturgeon, except that it had arms. The panicked brothers fled the scene, and when they returned later, the creature had disappeared, presumably carried off by waves after its death. All that was left of its presence were marks on the beach and a number of silver scales about the size of silver dollars. An extraordinary sighting took place by the entire crew of a ship bound from Buffalo, New York to Toledo, Ohio in July of 1892, which was carried by local newspapers. The crew, including captain, saw a large area of water approximately 1/2 mile ahead of them, churned up and foaming. As they approached, they saw a huge sea serpent that appeared to be wrestling about in the waters as if fighting with an unseen foe. They observed as the creature relaxed itself and stretched out full length, estimated at 50 feet and 4 foot in circumference, with its head sticking up above the water an additional 4 feet. The brownish creature's eyes were described as viciously sparkling, and large fins were also noticed. Crystal Beach near Fort Erie was the scene of another sighting on May 5th, 1896. This time there were 4 eyewitnesses who watched for 45 minutes as a 30-foot creature with a dog-shaped head and pointy tail churned up the water as it swam about until it would finally disappear before nightfall. A reward of $100,000 has been offered by Huron Lagoons Marina for the capture of Bessie, dead or alive. Which contradicts the story I read earlier, because the story was $100,000 alive. 1960. During 1960, Ken Golick was fishing off a pier in Sandusky when he heard 2 rats. He threw rocks at the sound and then saw a large creature rise from the water. He stated that the creature was a cigar-shaped, measured 1 to 2 feet wide, and it pushed itself out of the lake with its 4 flippers, then rested on a nearby beach. This occurred at 11 o'clock in the morning on a clear, calming night. 11 o'clock in the morning on a night, yeah. During 1969, Jim Schneider stated that the serpent came within 6 feet of him near the South Bass Island in Lake Erie. He did not say how long the creature was just that it was 2 feet wide. In 1981, Teresa Kobach of Akron saw a snake-like reptile with flippers. She stated that it was so large it could have easily capsized the boat. It seemed to be playing. For the 1983 sighting, Mary M. Landau told John Schaffner about an encounter with Bessie. In the lake, she heard a rowing sound and saw what looked like a capsized boat. It was greenish-brown colored and about 40 to 50 feet long. Landau realized it wasn't a boat, but an animal of some sort. It had a long neck and its eyes were visible from the side. 1985, Tony Schill of Akron, Ohio, saw a giant serpent when he was boating. It was dark brown and had a long, flat tail. Tony stated that 5 humps came out of the water and that there was no way it was a sturgeon. A friend was also boating with Tony, and he came face to face with the creature and said it had 5 humps and was black colored. Later that year, Dale Munro spotted a sea serpent from Lorraine Coast Guard Station. He said it was visible for 4 minutes and estimated it to be twice the size of his 16-foot sailboat, which would make it 32 feet or 9.7536 meters. And we go on, there's a bunch more sightings. Everything just seems, for starters, we can sit here and say that Huron, Ohio wants a Loch Ness Monster. That's what they want it to be. They want it to be a Loch Ness Monster. They want the tourism from it, because that's the thing. Loch Ness gets so much gets so much tourism where people come into Scotland, finding Loch Ness and trying to find the Loch Ness Monster. And that's, I think, what Huron's trying to do. A lot of people say they're sturgeon, but if it's a sturgeon, why do people think it's 30 to 50 feet long? So yeah, it's likely and it's unlikely. It's one of those things where I'd have to see to believe it. But what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts, guys? What are your thoughts on the on Bessie, the Lake Erie monster? I know we're running along, but we only got a couple more to cover. This one's a quick one. The Kirtland Melonheads. So the folklore of the Melonheads. They're in American folklore of Ohio, Michigan, and Connecticut. Melonheads are being basically there's 3 states you can find the Melonheads in: Ohio, Michigan, and Connecticut. Each one has a different story. Each one has different origins and stuff like that for them, basically. But melonheads are beings generally described as small humanoids with bulbous heads who occasionally emerge from hiding places to attack people. Different variations of the legend attribute different origins to the entities. So we're only going to study the Ohio ones because that's what we're studying this week. We're studying the cryptids of Ohio. When we do Michigan or we do Connecticut, we'll do that next. But the Melonhead stories of Ohio are primarily associated with the Cleveland suburb of Kirtland in Lake County. According to local lore, the Melonheads were originally orphans under the watch of a mysterious figure known as Dr. Crow. Crow is said to have performed unusual experiments on the children, who developed large hairless heads and malformed bodies. Some accounts claim that the children were already suffering from hydrocephalus, and that Crow injected even more fluids into their brains. Hydrocephalus is a condition in which an accumulation of cerebrospinal fluid occurs within the brain. This typically causes increased pressure inside the skull. Older people may have headaches, double vision, poor balance, urinary incontinence, personality changes, or mental impairment. And in babies, it may be seen as a rapid increase size in head size, basically. Other symptoms may include vomiting, sleepiness, seizures, and downward pointing in of the eyes. Hydrocephalus can occur due to birth defects or acquired later in life. But eventually the legend continues that the three children killed Crow, burned down the orphanage, and retreated to the surrounding forests and supposedly feed on babies. Legend holds that the Melonheads may be sighted along Wisner Road in Kirtland and adjacent Chardon Township in Geauga County. The Melonhead legend has been popularized on the internet, particularly on the websites Creepy Cleveland and Dead Ohio, where users offer their own versions of the story. A movie, Legend of the Melonheads, released in 2010, is based on the Ohio legend and various other legends in the Kirtland area. In the 2018 horror anthology movie, The Field Guide to Evil, featuring 8 stories from cultures around the world, the contribution from the U.S. is a rendition of the Melonheads, where a man's son is taken into the woods and turned into a melonhead. The 2024 release, The Melonheads, House of Crow, is also based on the legend. Today, some believe that the Melonheads may be sighted along Wisner Road and in Kirtland. It did it again. Why did it do that? Research has shown that Dr. Crow probably did not exist. Let's state a fact for a fact. Melonheads are probably not real. They're probably folklore. They're more than likely orphans that had some kind of human deformities or, on them. And basically back in the 1800s and that, if you looked weird or you looked different, you were either a witch or you were just a freak. And they tried to separate you from society. And that's probably what they did. These people had that hydrocephalus disease. They were scared, probably hid away from society, were kept in a school or an asylum or a sanitarium or something like that, away from the regular public who were going to make fun of them or be scared of them, hopefully not hunt them down. But yeah, that's what that was. That's more than likely what that is. So yeah, the Metalhead's great story, more than likely not real. Well, that brings us to our final cryptid in Ohio, the Loveland Frogman. I saved this one for last because this is a big. They made a big deal about this cryptid in Loveland. Loveland is a suburb of Cincinnati, about 30, 45 minutes south of here, and about probably 20 minutes north of Cincinnati. There's like a big festival they have every year. There's a museum. It's the Loveland the Frogman legend is included in the Loveland History Museum, and it's a big deal. And if you have what is it, Scarebox, I think, or Screambox on Amazon or Screambox in general, they did just release a movie about the Frogman. It's fictional, of course, and it's a horror movie, but they did just release one. But let's go ahead. It's a beloved figure here down in Loveland, though. So we're gonna do our best to describe what's going on down there. This will be our final cryptid of the week. We've gone really long on this. This is probably the longest episode I've done. But according to local legend, the Loveland Frog Man was an enormous frog-like creature that lived in Loveland, Ohio, measured approximately 4 feet tall, and walked on 2 feet. The frogman was first spotted in 1955 when a traveling salesman was driving through Loveland streets late at night and spotted 3 large, strange figures standing in the road before him. Each of the figures was approximately 4 feet in height, with strange leathery skin and, stranger still, frog faces. The salesman made a quick escape, and his reports made their way into local lore. Naturally, there are many variations to the story, such as the creatures varying in height and being spotted in the shadow of a bridge. Most dramatically, in one version, a frog was seen holding a glowing wand above his head, which rained down a parabola of sparks. Basically, that I've read a couple of articles about it because one of the sightings, one of the stories say that he had the wand above his head that they could control electricity. I don't see that. I don't see that being true. One of the most intriguing cases encountered is that of the Loveland frogmen, or Loveland lizards as they're called sometimes. The story of these unique creatures begins. Okay, we already did that. Lonely stretch of road that runs along the Miami River in Claremont County, just on the outskirts of a small town known as Loveland, Ohio. A little more in-depth stories with this one. That's why I put it in here. At approximately 3:30 a.m., a businessman named Robert Honeycutt claimed to have witnessed three bipedal quasi-reptilian entities congregating by the side of the road. The man pulled his car to the curb and observed these creatures for what he estimated to be about 3 minutes. During this time, he noticed that these strange beings stood between 3 and 4 feet tall, were covered with gray leathery skin, and had webbed hands and feet. Their most distinguishing characteristic, however, was their distinctly frog like heads, which the man claimed bore deep wrinkles where their hair should have been. Just as the man was about to steal away, one of the creatures suddenly held what the witness could only describe as a wand above its head. The anonymous source further claimed that sparks spewed out of the end of the device, and he left post haste. Thus begins the bizarre legend of the Loveland Frogman. This tale would be fascinating enough if it ended there, but the two most significant encounters in this case, and indeed two of the most significant encounters in the annals of cryptozoology, were yet to come. While there were occasional reports for decades, the beast was most famously spotted in 1972 and quickly entered the public consciousness after the strange reports were backed up by a serving police officer. According to the official police reports, on March 3rd, 1972, Officer Ray Shockey was driving on patrol by the Little Miami River when a huge creature ran in front of his vehicle. At about 1 a.m. on March 3rd, 1972, nearly 17 years after the first report, the same story. Why did I do this? He was traveling along Riverside Road, heading towards Loveland when he saw something that would forever change his life. The officer claimed that he was driving slowly due to the substantial amount of ice on the road when he saw what looked like a dog by the curb. Suddenly, the animal darted in front of the cruiser, forcing the officer to slam on the brakes in order to avoid a potential collision with the creature. Once the police cruiser came to a halt, its headlights fell upon the prone animals, and at this point, the officer described something that seems literally too bizarre to be true. In the span of seconds, this crouched frog like creature stood on two legs, stared back at the policeman, then scrambled over the guardrail and scurried down the embankment, finally disappearing into the Ohio River. The officer The officer in question described the creature as being 3 to 4 feet tall and weighing in the area of 50 to 75 pounds. Hold on one second. He also claimed that its skin had a leathery texture and that the animal's features resembled those of a frog or lizard. Another officer investigated the scene later that evening. He saw no sign of the creature, but reported that there were distinct scratch marks on the guardrail where the animal purportedly crossed. The second sighting occurred 2 weeks later, while police officer Mark Matthews had an encounter of his own. According to the report, Officer Matthews, while driving into Loveland, spotted what he believed to be an injured animal lying on the pavement. Matthews climbed out of his cruiser with the intention of removing the carcass from the already ice-slicked road, when the creature abruptly lurched upwards into a crouched position. Taken aback by the frogman's reptilian visage, Matthews unholstered his revolver and took a shot at the creature, which then proceeded to hobble over to the side of the road and step over the guardrail, all the while keeping a watchful eye on the trigger-happy officer. Matthews, frogman, matched the first officer's description down to the last detail, with the exception of a tail, which was absent in early reports. This is the Ron Schaffner. I don't think I've talked about him yet, but this is the his description, his sketch. I don't what the officers said they seen. Um, but in the years which have followed these events, Officer Matthews has reneged somewhat on his tale. He now claims that the animal in question was nothing more than a large iguana, which escaped from its owner. He further insists that the only reason he shot at the creature was to help confirm a fellow officer's story, a story which was, of course, being met. Sorry, I had to sneeze. Being met with predictable skepticism by their superiors. Whether or not Matthew's change of heart was inspired by ridicule or the fading memory of an event from which he was 30 years removed, the fact remains that his own testimony counterindicates his later retraction. In a 2001 email interview, Officer Mark Matthews, now retired, explained that the incident was habitually blown out of proportion. He stated that it was and is no monster. It was not leathery or had wet matted fur. It was not 3 to 5 feet tall. It did not stand erect. The animal I saw was obviously some type of lizard that someone had as a pet that either got too large for its aquarium, escaped by accident, or they simply got tired of it. It was less than 3 feet in length, ran across the road, and was probably blinded by my headlights. It presented no aggressive action. Matthews attempted to shoot the creature in order to back up the account of his partner's sighting a few nights prior, but the lizard escaped, most likely to die from its injury or from the bitter freezing cold. Basically, there was another recent sighting of Frogman. A frogman was spotted in August of 2016 by Sam Jacobs and his girlfriend while they were playing Pokemon Go in Cincinnati. The location of the sighting casts doubt on the authenticity. Basically, a lot of people are saying because it did not take place wasn't seen in Loveland, that it could possibly be true. He has a video. The video kind of does look a little fake, but I don't think that it's not an impossibility for it to be seen in Cincinnati, considering the Ohio River runs literally along the border of Cincinnati, Ohio, and Newport, Kentucky. So yeah, it is very possible. See if there's anything else on here. Okay, so it was actually St. Patrick's Day when Officer Matthews shot the frogman, iguana, whatever you want to call it. But I believe that's gonna do it. That's gonna do it for this episode. I hope everybody enjoyed the Cryptids of Ohio. I enjoyed putting this episode together. I really do hope everybody does enjoy it because I want to do this again. I enjoy doing it. Hopefully next time some Raz can join me or somebody can join me. I know Raz is under the weather, so I hope you feel better, buddy. But I hope we can get some people on to make it a little more interested in me just sitting here talking about the cryptids and that. So what we're going to do now is I have a wheel that I found on the internet, and it is going. It has all 50 states on it. We are going to spin it to find out which state we're going to work on next. I figure that's going to be a lot better than going in alphabetical order, because then it'll be forever we get to some people's states. So let me bring that website up. There we go. Give it a quick spin. Here we go, and we are going. Still spinning. Hold on. For our next episode, when we do Shivers again, I don't know when we're going to do it again, but we are going to... Come on. Is it going to stop or not? Oh, I got to hit stop. I'm sorry. We're going to the New England. We're going to Vermont. So that'll be our next episode of Shivers, possibly next month. I think I'm going to do this once a month like I had planned to do it before. Like I planned on doing it before I had moved over here to the Owlite Network, which I am still very excited to be part of. But guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Enjoyed learning about the Cryptids of Ohio. You can find me on every platform: Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube at the Bloody Binge Movie Podcast. You can if you have any. Next week we will be going back to our normal format. We will be doing movies. I haven't decided the movie yet. But if you have any suggestions, feel free to email them to me at the Bloody Binge Podcast. Bloody Binge at gmail.com. You can email any, just want to talk to me, want to email or anything like that. Feel free. Bloody Binge at gmail.com. Send in your movie suggestions. What do you want to see covered on the show? If you are from Vermont and you wish to send in some stories or sightings of cryptids in your area, feel free. Again, Bloody Binge at the Bloody Binge. I'm sorry. It is just Bloody Binge. BOLO, or I can't spell. Let me slow down. BLOODYBINGE at gmail.com. You can also find me on Twitch playing games very badly under Sewer Dweller 78. You can also find me on Facebook at Stephen Henderson, STEPHAN Henderson. You can also find me this September and October. If you're in the Dayton area or you plan to visit the Dayton area, you will find me at Hell's Dungeon. I am a scare actor there, working with everybody. You can also find me when it comes back, when it returns. I will be, of course, always here on the Owlite Network every other Wednesday on Matt and Monsters with Raz and Matt, talking the latest wrestling news or wrestling goings on. I think it's been paused at least till maybe the fall. We'll see what's going on. But guys, have fun. Have a great weekend. Have a great week. Be good to each other. And as always, watch more horror movies. Sorry, I hit the wrong video there.